This is Luke Swenson, and you are fortunate enough to be listening to Mark of the Maker.
All right, there's our man and friend of the show, Mr. Luke Swenson, traditional knife maker out of Texas, actually now out of Idaho, right?
Mm-hmm.
Giving us a little read-in for Mark of the Maker. So like Luke said, you're listening to the Mark of the Maker podcast. I'm Mark Steiner, and this is episode 32 of Mark of the Maker. So let's go make sure we got all of our normal panel with us. Mr. Michael Birch, are you here with us?
I'm here. Oddly enough, he sounds like a bit like Billy.
That's what I thought.
Who does?
Yeah.
Luke does?
Yeah.
Luke does.
That's funny. And we clearly have Mr. Tom Crine.
Yep, I'm here.
All right, and we have Sean Kendrick.
Hey.
Or as it says on my screen, El Fantasmo.
El Fantasmo Magnifico.
Fantastic. All right. And so we have another interview this week for episode 32, this time with a newer knife maker, someone who has a very interesting personal history, and he's going to take us on what I'm going to call Mr. Cho's wild ride is what I expect this will be before we're all said and done. So we'll see how that goes. But Billy Cho, who you've heard on our show, he's done some intros and told us some funny stories from Blade Show. I think Billy told us about his Lyft driver, right, in one of the episodes from the Blade Show post-show episode.
Yep.
where he had the Lyft driver lady with the giant ninja knives in the car with her. So welcome to Mark of the Maker, Billy.
Hey, yo, Playboy, this is Nick Rolfe. I'm just kidding. What's going on, guys?
Yep. Welcome to the show, man. We're glad you took the time to
It's
join
a pleasure.
us.
It's an honor, man. You guys have been, I really didn't feel like I deserved to be on this podcast because you guys are like, a lot of my heroes growing up, as far as up in the knife making career of mine. And so I've always felt like there's so many better people you can have on the show, but I'm honored to be here.
We weren't really sure about having you on the show either, Billy, to be completely honest with you.
busy. It's cool. it was cool. That's fine.
I'm teasing.
I'd understand.
I'm kidding. Right out the gate,
So
we
this
got
is how
jokes.
it's going to begin. Yeah, this is how it's going to begin.
This is how it's going to begin. This is going to be in the middle, and this is going to be at the end. That's how it goes.
Perfect. Don't offend me, please.
We know you're delicate.
Yeah, he's a delicate
Yes.
little flower, Billy Cho.
As a person of color, I just don't want to be offended.
Oh, there it is.
Jeez.
I had to start.
Yep. Okay.
I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Okay.
Open up wounds.
You can tap out whenever you're ready, buddy. You just let us know.
And you know what'll
I'm
happen.
good.
You were warned before we started recording. And we'll
I
let
do.
that stand.
I do.
Right.
You guys don't want to know.
No, they don't.
No.
All right. So, Billy, why don't you start out? Tell us what you're. So, Billy's a knife maker. Are you a full-time knife maker now, Billy? Is that official or somewhere in the middle or what?
Yeah, I do own a firearms business, and I actually go back and forth working on guns and knives. And so, but lately the knife stuff has kind of gotten pretty popular. So it almost seems like it's kind of become maybe 70% knives and 30% guns now, which is totally cool. So
Nice.
So I guess I would consider myself double full-time.
Double
Full-time making guns. Full-time making guns.
Billy's got two jobs.
I do. And so actually I'm a dad too. And so 2 young kids, that's like a third job. So
That makes like 20 total.
No
That's
joke.
how that shakes out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
Billy, why don't you tell the kids at home what your brands are so they can associate you with with the brand names?
my firearms company is called Ironborn Armory, and I predominantly work on comm block stuff, which is AK-47 stuff, very taboo stuff these days, but mostly all the foreign Russian style, communist style. They'll say that's what comm block means. Weapons, and so anything that's part of the AK family, I do under Ironborn Armory. And then my knife company is just simply my name. It's under Billy Cho Knives.
So people know your name. They've heard some stories from you on the show. They've heard you do read-ins for us and other funny stuff, and now they know your brand. So let's start with basic stuff, Billy. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you kind of come from?
Okay. So where should I begin? My father was a relentlessly self-improving boulangerie owner from Belgium with low-grade narcolepsy and a penchant for buggery. My mother was a 50-year-old French prostitute named Chloe with web feet.
Wow.
My father would womanize and he would drink. He'd make outrageous claims like he invented the question mark. No, that's a little bit of Dr. Evil, right?
A little bit.
Right. Yeah, that was a Dr. Evil riff right there.
But I always say that whenever someone asks me for my bio. But
Happen a lot.
so my parents were immigrants to the United States. They moved to the States in the 1970s, late 70s. I believe they moved to Tacoma, Washington. But I wasn't 100% clear on that. But I was born and raised in Las Vegas in 1983. So I'm 36 years old. Oh man, you just stop keeping track after you're 25.
Yeah.
But
you just skipped 10 or so years. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't feel 26 anymore.
So, Bill, your parents came from Korea.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. When they came to the States, they became American citizens. And so, they came here to live the American dream. My dad's brother first moved here, I think, before he did. And my dad came over shortly after with my mom. So
Purely an opportunity thing?
Right. My dad had me a lot older in his life. So he had me in his 40s. And so my dad lived through all the craziness that went down with, the Korean War and Korea becoming a third world country and all that. And so, he had opportunity to come over and he did.
Awesome.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were second generation at all.
Yeah. So, and it's a little bit different than the standard second generation because my dad was such a lot older than the current second generation. So, when it comes to Korean immigrants, a lot of people consider that someone who would be second generation would be someone in their 50s now. And so, my dad kind of raised me as if, I was, I should have been born 20 years earlier.
Wow.
So
he always treated you like you were older than you actually were. Is that what that means?
Correct. Yeah. And, he wasn't really the type to show affection, and he kind of worked hard to show affection. That was kind of his way of just kind of providing for the family. It's like, I feel like my dad really never opened up to me as well, so he never was like vulnerable or anything like that. And, growing up, he never, he would never really, he wouldn't go buy me a car just because I turned 16. He's like, you're off on your own. You better, work and get your own everything.
Right.
And so, whatever I had as far as clothing wise, going for school or all that, I just, made money on my own once I got to, like working age, 14, 15 years old. So that's how my parents were. And so, both my parents moved to Las Vegas to get a job as car dealers at casinos. And it wasn't until I left Las Vegas where people said that was a strange occupation. And so, and so, growing up in Vegas, you have slot machines inside, grocery stores, Denny's, gas stations, there's gambling everywhere. And, growing up there, it was just kind of bizarre when people are like, what, and it wasn't until, I went to college in Missouri where, people thought that people from Las Vegas lived at casinos as well. Like, which casino do you live in? I'm like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So maybe it was just the people of Missouri. So I believe
that's
Birchland. So
that's just a Missouri thing. Don't.
But, being working as car dealers or working in casinos, a lot of immigrants went there because you'd actually get paid fairly well and without having any kind of education. And so a lot of immigrant families went to work in casinos either as a janitor, a porter, whatever, or a car dealer, or work inside restaurants inside of there. And so, I mean, for example, I mean, dealers today, a lot of people don't realize they can make over $100,000 a year in Las Vegas. I think with the Wynn Casino, they make the most money as dealers, and food servers, they can make 80,000. You know, a bus boy can make $40,000 a year. You know, and
Wow.
girls that are go-go dancers can make $1,000 a night. You know, and so and it's one of the biggest reasons why people in Vegas, you know, they don't really care about education. You know, they have the worst education in the entire country, and you know, you can grow up and work at some club. You know, drop out of school, go work at some club, and make six figures. You know, every year.
Right.
So-
Right.
Sounds enticing. I mean, I'm an educated. I mean,
Right. You know, I've heard stories of, you know, doctors quitting and becoming casino dealers because they didn't have to deal with the stress of people dying and stuff like that. And they'll still get the same amount of pay, you know? And so,
Yeah.
Huh.
Very interesting.
yeah. So, you know, kids that are born in Vegas are a rare species of people. And, you know, I didn't have any kind of idea that the rest of the world wasn't 24 hours, you know, as, you know, a young kid, we'd go out and have, you know, steak and eggs at the casino at midnight. You know, it was just like a
Yeah.
weird lifestyle, you know, once I got an outside view of it.
That's interesting. I wonder. So you know, there are some similarities between that situation of not really encouraging the education side of things. You hear that same story in other places where there's basically a large manual labor force, or you know what I mean, like in Pennsylvania and steel country, same story, right? In Kentucky and the coal mines, same thing.
Mhm.
Here in Michigan, when the auto industry was booming post World War II, same exact thing, right? There was no incentive for people to necessarily finish high school or go to college for that matter, or whatever, because there was a job there, and generations of people go through that, and it becomes the expectation or the norm, right? Where
Right.
it's just, that's what my dad did, and that might even be what my grandfather did, or you know what I mean? There might be like a long, rich history of people who maybe finished high school, maybe didn't, and went to work in a factory or in a steel mill or wherever. And in this case, I guess in the casino industry as well, right?
Right. And so it's kind of sad, you know, the fact that, you know, casinos, you know, the high paying dealers are pretty much the young and good looking people that would graduate from dealer school, and they go to the brand new casinos. And then as they get older, you know, they get kind of pushed down to the more rundown casinos where they get pay as much, and they end up going to downtown or off strip casinos, you know, and still working until, you know, their grandpas and grandmas. So,
Yeah.
kind of like a sad cycle with Las Vegas, you know. Yeah, it was just something that was kind of like the norm in growing up in Vegas. So, but I mean, but I was also like, you know, 80s kid. So I think I felt like I was like the last generation of kids who, you know, grew up in Vegas and who actually played outside, because we didn't have the internet,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And I remember playing outside when it was 120 degrees, and you go into the shade and it's 100 degrees, and, you know, playing outside, but you don't really see that anymore.
No, unfortunately, no. It's not a thing so much anymore.
Right. And you're not even allowed to have trees or grass in Vegas in your homes anymore, just because there's a drought. And so,
Wow.
but
What do you have,
yeah,
dirt?
yeah. And they put like rocks out in front of their house and houses and make like, hey, look, this could look like a river that's empty of water. So, they would
Right.
To be
have,
honest,
like,
I'd be down with that if you didn't have to mow it.
Mhm.
yeah, there's no mowing. And so even if you put grass down, you'd have to use a ton of water, and they'd end up dying every year anyway. And so, so a lot of the older homes in Vegas actually have a big yard with grass, and all the new homes, they just have rocks and dirt in front of their houses,
Right.
with like very, very little trees that need very little water, like palm trees and stuff like that. And so, but yeah, it was, again, I played outside, you know, and nowadays you don't see that anymore. And the other thing was that, you know, we lived basically in like this, you know, we call it a concrete jungle, where there wasn't anything that related to nature to explore, you know?
Right.
So
right.
we couldn't go down to the creek or explore the woods, or, So we basically rode our bikes around, and caused trouble and loitered everywhere, and would go down to local arcades, comic book stores, or just hang out in each other's houses.
So not an outdoor, not growing up outdoors hunting or spending time out in the wilderness or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah, interesting.
Not at all. There's been a few times where we're going to family trips where I remember going fishing in Utah or an hour away. There's some mountainous country out there in Vegas, and it actually snows out there in the winter. So
right.
But my parents worked such weird shifts because Vegas was 24 hours, and being car dealers, some of them they worked swing shift, or which is the 5 to midnight or graveyard shift. And so I remember just not having the opportunity to just go out to an hour away, and I remember just being home alone a lot also with my sister. And so as young kids, it's just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And when you become a father, you kind of think about, man, that was a pretty crazy life, And so, many a night, me and my sister would be home alone. My parents would be like, "Hey, don't open the door for anybody. Leave the lights off." And it was pretty crazy.
Latchkey kids.
So, yeah. And so what do kids do when they don't really have family around all the time?
Start fires.
They bond with their friends. That exactly. Yeah, they bond with their friends, that have like similar situations going at home, other friends where their parents were at casinos. And so all our friends, essentially, we became like a family, we became super tight. And so we just obviously went around and caused trouble. And so, and there was a lot of, gang activity in our area in the 90s, and I think it's because like young kids like us, didn't really have any adult supervision, started causing trouble. And of course, the generation before us, which was my friends' older brothers and all that, they went through a similar situation. They became, hardcore gangsters.
Yeah.
And so, so that's when I think it was just like a perfect storm of that happening. When you think about gang activity of, the Crips and Bloods and stuff like that in California, that happened because they felt like they didn't have injustice. There was a lot of police brutality and all that. But when it came to a lot of the Asian gangs, I think, especially in Vegas, it was just because our parents weren't around. And so it just allowed no parental supervision, and kids would just wild out. And so it wasn't that I ever doubted that my parents like cared for me. I knew they did. They're just doing their best, right? To try to provide for our family and live the American dream. And so even going back to elementary school, that's when I started. I realized that my mom actually collected coins, like American made silver certificate dollar bills, $2 bills, silver quarters, Morgan dollars and silver half dollars. And she'd come across them a lot at the casinos, so she'd like collect them. And so that kind of got me into collecting early on. And so
very cool.
I started collecting coins early on. And and so I always grew up with obsession with knives and weapons in general, and maybe a little bit unhealthy. I would make little switchblade knives with using popsicle sticks with rubber bands and a clothespin. You guys ever make one of those?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd make my little own, my own crossbows and stuff like that with popsicle sticks and I've always loved knives. I think a lot of it was, just cause, growing up in the 90s and 80s, all the cool movies too,
Yeah, buddy.
So, the other thing was in Vegas, we had flea markets, but they were actually called swap meets.
Right.
And a couple of my family members owned like little shops there where they sold, clothing, socks or whatever. And I would go, and of course they had that booth where they had basically the bucket of swords and entire display of ninja weapons and
right.
and cutlery. And they wouldn't care how old you were. They would sell you whatever you wanted. So I remember,
true story.
Oh yeah. I remember as a young kid, I bought a couple Bali songs and some throwing stars and so that started early on. My parents didn't approve. I remember one time I bought like this huge Bowie, and they took that away from me, but
well, good for them.
Yeah. And so TV had a lot of influence on that. you're not gonna play all outside all the time in Las Vegas when it's 100 something degrees outside.
Right.
So I watch a lot of TV and movies and play a lot of video games.
I was going to ask if that's where that came from, was from movies and TV shows, and especially when there's not parents around, kind of keeping track of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I had Home Alone access to HBO. So, yeah, so I typically watch all the cool movies, Rambo, Predator, Conan, Crocodile Dundee.
Porky's.
But, also being a young, I was also a young kid. So, I enjoyed, the Ninja Turtles was a big thing for me, Big Trouble in Little China, a lot of action flicks like that.
Yeah.
And so, I actually watched a lot of like stuff that was outside of normal stuff. I watched a lot of Hong Kong style action flicks, a lot of martial arts movies, anime, sci-fi, and all of which I kind of draw my inspiration from to this day. And so, all the American movies were awesome. You remember that, that Bowie from Predator and, the sword from Highlander and all that. But like the Asian movies, especially Hong Kong style action flicks, they just thought way out of the box. And that just kind of like basically shocked and awed me, just as far as what you thought of when you thought of swords and weapons. For example, I remember in the 90s, I think this movie came out like in 93 or something, but it was a horrible movie. Don't watch it. But it was called Savior of the Soul. It was a Hong Kong style action flick with Andy Lau. He was one of the biggest action stars of China, I guess, at the time. Total garbage movie. So, but the main bad guy, he had a sword, right? Which the blade was like a katana blade. So had a hamon on there and everything. But the handle was like a cutlass. So it had like a finger guard that kind of
like
covered
a basket hilt.
his fingers. Yeah.
Oh.
And so I was just like, whoa, that was just crazy. And so, and then the main good guy, he had one of those wushu style floppy swords, and kind of like the Green Destiny from Crouching Tiger, but he actually had it wound up inside of a ball, and he would basically use that to fight with like a yo-yo, and he would attach a handle, and then pretty much the blade would come out like out the front blade. And so it was just kind of like wild and crazy. Yeah, wild and crazy weapons like that I just kind of like watched all the time, just because my parents were into that. So they would rent, we couldn't read Chinese or whatever, but they would get it with like American subtitles and stuff like that. And so I watched a lot of those things and anime. And so it would just kind of, my idea of the cool weapons and stuff like that were just way beyond, traditional swords or knives and things like that,
I didn't get into that until like they brought in Rumble in the Bronx into the American movie theaters. Right. And that was like 1995 or something. And that's when you started going back, besides some of the typical American, ninja, quote movies, man, that stuff didn't really exist in popular mainstream. But man, when that hit, I was like, I started going back and looking at all the weird stuff. Cause I was like, holy shit, that blew my mind.
Yeah. That whip sword sounds like it's based on the actual Indian. There was an Indian sword that was like a flexible whip, right? Yeah.
Interesting. Yes, there was. I actually saw it on one of those episodes where they test historical weapons, or one of the shows where they test.
Really?
Yeah, for real.
Supposedly really hard to use. Very dangerous.
Yeah.
Seems that way.
And in the movies, the guy would like swing the sword and, on the flat side of the blade, and it would wrap around the pole, and it would just like, hit the guy around the corner and stuff like that. It was just kind of like way out there, And so, definitely interesting, as far as stuff I grew up with, and I still draw inspiration to this day. I mean, the Chinese style swords with the rings on them, and I was like, should I make a folder with a ring on there? And I was like, nah, that's probably kind of lame, but maybe I'll do it, as like a thumb opener,
right?
Because and so instead of having a disc, I was gonna put a ring on there, and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff I still think about to this day, and so so I just kind of look back and draw inspiration from that.
Blade 2020.
So
Cho whip sword. Holding whip sword.
I'm working on it.
Right. I want to go to the whip sword demo, but I'm going to do it from inside the glass.
Yeah. Not around the corner.
You're doing the demo. What are you talking about? I'm gonna need you to cut some bamboo mats with the whip sword.
Right. Mark, go take this apple and stand over there.
Exactly. So I guess I can go to middle school. I guess middle school. Same situation with my parents, but my dad actually started the business. He opened up a restaurant in the commercial center in Las Vegas, and that's where the Lotus of Siam is. Tom, I know that's one.
Dude,
Yeah.
for real?
Vegas, but yeah. And so this was in I would say mid 90s. And so my dad had a restaurant there for a number of years. And so obviously he was busy with that as well. And so same thing, I had like no curfew in middle school. So
Wow.
yeah, so my parents would want me home and they'd think I'd be home, but they weren't home to know that I wasn't home. And so, I mean, there's been a few times where I would, 7th grade, I would go out and come home at 4 or 5 in the morning and, walking home, and stuff like that late at night. And it was pretty crazy. But
yeah,
at that point, I became very much an entrepreneur as well. So, I would give my friends' older brother money to do sports betting for me and stuff like that. And so I would have extra cash from gambling. Yeah.
Wow.
When I was 12, 13 years old. Yeah. And watching sports when you gamble on it is 10 times more exciting. I don't know what you say.
Yeah.
But
I had a guy that I roomed with in college, and for the longest time, I just thought he was like a super, super sports fan guy, right? And then I realized after like 6 months, the dude was gambling huge amounts of money, especially for a college age guy, on like hockey and basketball. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? No wonder you're excited about this game, right? He would get spun up. It was very wild.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I watched the most basketball in the early 90s, and I think that was actually the best time for basketball. But I stopped watching basketball after I stopped gambling. It was kind of funny. But
that is funny.
And that was after middle school. So high school I didn't watch basketball at all, but yeah, and so middle school is also where I discovered breakdancing. And so I met a friend of mine that was a really good breakdancer, and people think breakdancing is kind of dead, and it's kind of like what people imagine is spinning on boxes in the 80s, and but this is in the 90s, and breakdancing kind of pretty much have gone pretty underground at that point as far as competitive breakdancing. But I started breakdancing because face it, Asians can't play sports. So we're not tall enough to play basketball. We're not big enough to play football. So most of us, and so so we started breakdancing, and so I found out it was actually a good way to keep me out of trouble, because I was, like I said, I was grew up in a pretty gang infested area, and so there was a lot of kids my age doing drugs, and it started off at very innocent as far as drug use among my peers, smoking weed in middle school and stuff like that. But it quickly escalated to became like a big meth problem when I was in middle school and high school. Yeah, and so breakdancing, I found that it kind of I started getting pretty good at it, so it kind of kept me out of trouble. I didn't want to affect my health by doing drugs.
Right.
And so by the time I went to high school, I actually became somewhat of a pro breakdancer, and I kind of traveled all over the United States to compete. And my schoolwork suffered, but I was getting really good at breakdancing, so I just kind of was trying to pursue jobs with getting jobs with like Cirque du Soleil or other Vegas shows. And this is when I was in high school, 16 years old. And it's because a lot of these gigs would pay kids $40,000-$50,000 a year, to perform a couple days a night, and it was like winning the lottery.
Yeah. So Billy, did you do the breakdancing thing through like a dance studio kind of place, like traditional dancing, or was this all just individual? You're learning from your friends or your teammates?
Yeah. So we pretty much with just a group of guys that just got together and developed what they call a crew. So the crew name was actually Knucklehead Zoo, and throughout history, we actually represented the United States maybe 4 times in the World Championships.
Holy shit!
Oh,
And so, yeah,
This
yeah.
sounds
So,
like a
there's been
90s
documentaries.
It sounds like a '90s movie that called like "Spin It Up" or something.
So they actually did a movie called Battle of the Year. It was kind of based off when we first went to the World Championships to compete, and so that one was I think it was it came out in theaters, but went straight to DVD. But we were on several documentaries called like Planet B-Boy, where it covers each crew from two from Korea, one from Paris, us in Las Vegas, and there was like maybe one from Africa and Japan. And so it was like a documentary about us that was like at Tribeca and all that. So it was kind of pretty cool.
That is cool.
And,
You were in it?
I was not. So this was a little bit later when I decided to go off to college that they made this documentary.
Oh, it says 2007. Because I'm like, I'm going to watch this.
The documentary is actually pretty good. And so so that was like the first time we went to the World Championships, and then we went 3 more times after that. And I went with them the second time, but at that point I was old and fat now.
So explain how that works, Billy.
Yeah.
Do you like go get sponsors to help make that happen, or is this all out of pocket, or what?
Right. So what typically happens is there's actually breakdancing competitions that go on throughout the United States, and there's some really big ones. And so they do a qualifier, just like most competitive events. But the thing with breakdancing is not as big as skateboarding, because with skateboarding you can sell merchandise. That's why you can sell skateboards or shirts or whatever,
shoes or whatever. Yeah.
And, right. And so there's all these big events like the X Games, and there wasn't anything like that for breakdancing, because all you really needed was shoes. I guess some people don't even need shoes, right? And so you don't. It wasn't as big as skateboarding. And the crazy thing is they're actually going to put it in the Olympics for the next Olympics. I don't know if you heard that.
Really?
So yeah. So it's kind of crazy, but yeah. So with these dance competitions, if you win, usually the what do you call it? The promoter would end up paying for your flight there, but then you'd end up getting sponsors. I mean, we'd get clothing sponsors to pay for our stuff, Puma, Adidas, whatever, the typical breakdancing sponsorship stuff. But typically they wouldn't pay you money. So they'd pay for your trips, they'd pay for all your clothing and all your gear, and that you're kind of left on your own to basically pay for surviving in these third world countries or first world countries at these competitions. So it's kind of changed nowadays, where there's Monster Energy and Red Bull. They have their own athletes now, they're breakdancers, but it wasn't anything like that when we were kind of competing back then. So we'd have to find our own sponsors, and that's how it normally happens. Sometimes people, even if you win, you'd have to pay for your entire way to go to Germany or Paris for the World Championships, and then
wow.
And so
I have to ask a question. I'm going to ask this of Birch, because I know I expect he had trouble wrapping his head around it like I did. So Michael Birch, what would you expect is, a typical kind of people that sponsor breakdancing?
Right,
like, I'm like, oh yeah, the usual breakdancing sponsors.
I am over here
Googling.
Googling.
Is a usual breakdancing sponsor?
I'm Googling Billy Cho breakdancing. I am trying to find a video of Billy Cho breakdancing.
No.
I've got one I can send you, bud. You just let me go through my messages.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't competed a number of years, but I think the last time I breakdanced at a competition was like back in 2001 or 2000 or something like that. So
wow.
Before YouTube, thank God. So it just makes me jealous how skinny I was back then.
All I see is a video of you taking down an AR. How boring. Back to dancing, Billy.
But yeah, and so it was kind of exciting. So I really didn't care about high school either. I was always like the smarter kid, as far as I had like honor classes and stuff like that. But a lot of that suffered greatly, just because I was never going to school, And so whatever homework I didn't finish at high school, I would just not do it, because I would basically, high school would stop, end at like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and me and my friends would just practice till midnight, and then just go to school the next day. And we do that every day, just because I don't know, we were just kind of obsessed with it.
Right. What did your parents think about that whole thing?
Yeah.
Well, my dad, high school was another crazy time for me at that point. So, when I was 14, my parents actually got a divorce, and so it was a pretty nasty divorce where I have one sister. I have an older sister that's a year and a half older than me. Her name is Tony, and she basically lived with my mom. And I was so, I guess, wild that they kind of told me I had to live with my dad at that point. So, so the stipulation of the divorce was that my dad would get the restaurant and my mom would get the house. And so me and my dad ended up moving to my aunt's house temporarily until we got our own place, our own apartment. And so my dad, again, he was running the restaurant, so he was never home. Sometimes I wouldn't see him for 2-3 days at a time.
Wow.
And so, so he was never home. And
the restaurant game is no joke, man. Everybody I know that runs a restaurant, they're 24/7.
Yeah, and, my dad really liked the sauce too, so he was a pretty heavy drinker, and so I mean, there's been times where he got into a DUI and crashed his car, and then I would see him like 2 days later, and he'd come in with bandages, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just got a hospital. I got into a car accident." I'm like, "What the hell?"
Wow.
Right? And so there's been a few times that's happened. And so, I was pretty much off my own. So at that point, I would still visit my mom to, kind of help her out, mow the lawn and stuff like that, do the boy jobs and stuff like that for her. But they weren't around. And so, but also, when I was 16, my mom was diagnosed with cancer and she died 6 months later. And so,
man.
So it was a pretty crazy time in my life, and I pretty much, I just grew up really, really quick at that point. It was probably, the most traumatizing thing that kind of happened in my life. And so, and if it wasn't, for people in my life at the time, my friends, my high school girlfriend, breakdancing, and, even people from the church I was going to, I probably would have went down a more terrible path in life. And it's not to say that I wasn't pretty self-destructive and depressed during that time. But, those people kind of helped, draw me back from, going over the edge.
Would have been real easy for you to get sucked into a hole that you couldn't have come back from. And it had to take a good bit of resolve to not go down. Right.
It was so hard, man. It's like, I think I've healed over it, but I think a lot of my anxiety I've had, it kind of stems from that, during that traumatic time in my life. And it's kind of changed me physically where, I don't know when I'm stressed, and that's kind of weird. And my sister's the same way, cause we went through the same thing together, that whenever we're stressed, we don't realize that we're stressed. It's kind of weird until we have a full blown kind of like a panic attack. And so, but during that time, it's like, when I think about it, it was such a developmental time for a teenager, that it was just so crazy. And it was just a time that was just so sad all the time. I would have dreams where my mom would still be alive, and I'd wake up and just relive my life that was just sad. And, and it was really close to, for me going over that edge, and so, it was, and a lot of times where people who've never lost a parent, they have no idea, and so, it was crazy. And again, it's not saying that I wasn't pretty self-destructive, I was, but I never went to jail in my life,
Right.
Where there probably should have been times I should have went to jail, but then went to jail. But, it was because there's good people that were just kind of, encouraging me, hey, we have a competition. Don't think about that. Let's just keep on breakdancing and stuff like that. So a lot of times doing stuff like that just kind of kept my mind occupied, And
right.
And so, but high school I always say that high school was like the most fun I ever had, but it was also the saddest point in my life. And so, senior year of high school, I think I only needed 3 credits to graduate, and I decided to drop out of high school and just work. And people are like, "You're so stupid. Why are you doing that?" I was just so over school just because there's so much shit going on in my life, and 9/11 just happened as well. So this is 2001. And tourism just kind of died in Las Vegas. So, my dad's business was based off tourism, and so he basically lost his business at that point because my dad was saying, I think he said he was losing $5,000 a day from loss of business. And so he tries to survive as long as possible and just end up going under. And so he went to a huge depression and started drinking crazy heavily, and would get hammered every night. And I pretty much had to take care of him. I'd find him on the floor, or, he'd walk out belligerent and, end up peeing on the floor and all that stuff. And it was just a crazy time in my life, So I was just so over having to just go into school. So I just kind of worked a regular job. I ended up working at a mail order pharmacy. And so I worked at basically just, packing up prescription drugs inside a package, and they would mail them out. And it was just like a massive factory. And so I was realizing that other people were getting promotions and I wasn't, because they had high school diplomas. I was like, this is just garbage. This guy's an idiot. Right. So, and this is around 18 years old in my life. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to go back to adult education and get my diploma. I only need 2 to 3 credits anyway. I think it was 2 credits, but by the time a year later, I needed 3 credits. So it was actually really silly. I went to adult education and they just had me take the final for the 3 subjects. And in an hour, I passed and they gave me my diploma in one day. And so I was like, if I would have known, I would have done all of high school like this. So I went there, took 3 finals, and then got my diploma the same day.
You just test out all the way through.
Yeah. And so, and this is, during, this is after post high school. So, 18 to 20s, I was still grieving the loss of my parent. And what helped with that was like kind of helping other kids that were troubled, and so I wanted to give back, and helping other people just really helps you heal, and so I would try to help out at my church with kids who were kind of going through the same stuff I was going through growing up, and I helped a lot of other nonprofits and stuff like that. And
that's awesome.
When I turned 20, I decided to go to college in good old Birchland, Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
And
the learning mecca that it's known.
Boy, that was yes.
Yeah, what made you go to Springfield?
My girlfriend at the time was going to school there as well, and so, but I also got like a scholarship as well. But I wanted to just get out of Vegas. It was just like,
okay,
a lot of kids that kind of grow up in Vegas, they just go through this vicious cycle where they don't grow up, and a lot of the kids that whenever I go back and I meet up with like an old friend, they like still talk like they were in high school, and they'll still say the same jokes where they're in high school, like they never grew up, And so I was just kind of tired of all of it, and so I just like, I need to get out. And so, boy, that was an eye opener though. Springfield, Missouri. And that's where I think I first got, a love for nature there, and a guy who went to a city that was 24 hours and went to a place where gas stations closed. I was like, what the hell? Gas stations closed.
I imagine that wasn't a different experience.
Right. And when I went there, I told Birch about it, that this was like in 2003, I believe, that they would still you would pump your gas, then go inside and pay. And I was like, that is just the weirdest thing ever.
Right.
So you'd pump your gas and then go inside and pay. And gas was 99 cents back then. And
you can still do that in my town.
Really?
Yeah, you can pump your gas and go inside and pay.
Wow, that's crazy. So, but that's also when I first witnessed Amish people and Mennonites, and I was like, what the hell? They're real. It just kind of blew my mind. And Missouri is where I start. I bought my first firearms there. I bought my first shotgun there, my first pistol, and that's where I also saw my first non-flea market knife. And so,
wow.
A friend of mine, his name is Mike, and he's still a great friend of mine and entrepreneur himself, because he kind of grew up in a similar situation in Vegas. But basically, he was like, "You got to see this knife I just got," and he's like, "It's so sharp," and he showed me his Benchmade Griptilian, and
awesome.
and you know, at the time I didn't really remember what model it was. I actually hit him up. I was like, "What model Benchmade do you have?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I think it was a Griptilian." And at that point, I pretty much had all the cheapo, you know, knives that weren't really too sharp. You know, flea market knives are basically borderline butter knives. You know, and so
right.
So after I saw a Benchmade, I was like, "What? How much was this?" And I think he said it was like $60 or $70. I was like, "You must be out of your goddamn mind!" Right? $60 or $70 for a knife? You're crazy. But he's like, "Look how sharp it is," and he'd hold it up, you know, hold up a sheet of paper and just poke the knife through, and it'd go through like butter. I was like, "What if it gets dull?" He's like, "You could send it back for $5 and they'll sharpen it for you." I was like, "No way. That's crazy." And so then I bought my first Benchmade after that, you know, and I remember it was a model that gets hated on a lot, but it was a Warren Osborne model. And I believe it was a 670 Apparition it was called.
Yeah.
And I thought I was out of my damn mind for spending $100 on a knife. And,
Right.
But that was like my first.
Warren's got to get paid too, man.
Yeah. You know, and yeah, when I first met him at SHOT Show, I was like, "You're the guy," you know, and so it was pretty crazy. And so that was my first like nice knife, which that was outside a flea market knife or like a big 5, you know, $20 knife, whatever. But yeah, I spent $100 for that, and I don't have it, but I gave it to my brother-in-law, and he still has it, you know. And so I gave it to him when he graduated.
Nice.
I think it was high school, and so in Missouri was also where I learned to be kind of handy, and I'm a mechanical style guy. So whenever I had any car issues, I'd try to do the repairs myself or with my friend Mike. And it was a lot of times just because I was too poor to get a shop, you know. And so there was an incident where a good friend of mine basically T-boned me. We got into a car accident with each other. And it was just a random happenstance, and we were going to the same place. And so he T-boned me and totaled my car. And so it was like, I was like, all right, I better, you know, make the, you know, I had a liability insurance at the time, and I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to get any money for this, whatever. So that's where I kind of learned. I pretty much stripped the car entirely down to like the bare bones shell with just hand tools and sold off all the parts on eBay. And so, and then so
that's awesome.
I also did engine swaps. So I'd buy like a car shell, and then I'd buy another car, and me and my friend Mike basically rented a storage unit, right? But that was like 20 foot long, and it was just like you could stick a car on each side, and so basically we worked there at night at the storage unit, and with just you know, cigarette lighter, power inverter, and we did motor swaps with hand tools, where we would just drop the suspension, lift up the frame with our bare hands, pull out the motor with, you know, on a cardboard box, and then did the same thing with other car, and we did motor swaps that way. And
wow.
Yeah, and so, you know, after college, you know, this is in like 2008 now, I moved back to Las Vegas, and pretty much, you know, after a few years in Missouri, I was a total gun guy, total outdoors guy, you know. I always had a pocket knife in my pocket, and there's usually some kind of a production folder, but I also started collecting Benchmade Bali songs as well. And so,
nice.
Yeah.
What made you get into those guns in Missouri? What was the impetus for that?
I don't know. I think I always loved guns, you know, just like how, you know, my dad would never let me even have a BB gun. So I'd go out and buy my own BB guns, and rightfully so, because I shot out all the windows of my neighbor's house by accident, right? And so, but so funny story. I'll tell you the story when I shot out. My neighbor across the street had a Mustang, right? Like a fastback Mustang, like yours, Birch. And I don't know what I was thinking. I had a pump BB gun, and I was in the backyard of my house, and I saw the ice cream man drive by. I was like, you know what? I'm going to shoot the back of the ice cream man's truck. And I was in the backyard, so I was like, all right, as soon as he passes by, I'm going to shoot, and so it hit the back of his truck. You know, it's just going to bounce off, whatever. And these are those copperhead bullets, right? And so I shot it, and then all of a sudden I look across the street and saw the window of that Mustang just like raining down glass. I was like, oh my God. Oh shit. And so, I ran inside and I was scared, and that's the reason why my parents never bought me any kind of weapons, no wrist rockets, or anything like that. But I always loved guns. I mean, how can you not be a guy and like guns? I guess it happens, I guess, right? But the Vegas culture, happen. Vegas culture, you think of it as being very liberal and urban, but people in Vegas love their guns. So I still felt like, when I was in Vegas, I felt like it was no different than, being in Missouri as far as being able to buy guns or it wasn't really necessarily seen as taboo in Vegas having guns. I mean, there's gun ranges everywhere where you can rent machine guns and you can still open carry in Vegas. And if you have a CCW, you don't need to do a background check in Vegas. And a lot of places aren't like that,
right.
They're very, very liberal. And so I think it was just because I felt a little bit more independent after living in Missouri on my own, where I was always afraid that my dad might find out I have the gun or something like that. I don't know why.
Right.
Yeah. He was just like, makes don't sense. Buy one. Yeah, And so when I went to Missouri, it was just kind of I just felt more liberated and had more freedom to purchase what I wanted. And so I think that's what happened.
We hand you one when you fly into Missouri. You get your free Missouri gun
as you come off the jetway off the plane.
Yeah. So
Winchester.
Yeah. So now
that's what
I actually live. Nice. That's what they give you in Ohio.
That's pretty solid.
Well, no, that's what they gave me when I went to Missouri. There's like, sir, did you get your Winchester 70 before leaving the airport? And I was like, well, no, I missed that. Sorry.
Well, here's a coupon for when you come back. So
yeah, they got me on the way back home.
Yeah. So, so I guess I moved back to Vegas after college, and I worked for a church doing nonprofit stuff over there. I helped a friend plant a church that had a lot of ex gangbangers like that, and I also worked for a magic show on the Strip, and so I did pyrotechnics and breakdancing for a magic show at the Planet Hollywood on the Strip.
Nice.
So whenever
that's cool.
So whenever I go to the USN gathering, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this place. and I've told you guys stories about that. So, but that's a long story. But basically, I made airplanes appear and a lot of lame shit like that. So I don't want to say his name because I don't want him to get all pissy that I'm giving away his secrets. But
right.
I told you guys a story about, there's a material that magicians use called Killer Z, where basically if you, it's like a fabric that you can cover stuff with. And on stage, if the lights are dim, you can't see anything. You can't see. So you can basically have an entire suit made of this material and you look like, what did I say? Oh, no, I don't want to say that's kind of racist. I would say a reverse Klansman, but you can take that. So you're completely covered in like this weird outfit where you only have slits for your eyes and a giant cone head made of this Killer Z material, full bodysuit, and you're on stage the whole time, and there's lights and flashing stuff like that, but you're behind the background, and no one can see you that's in the audience. And
that is weird, isn't it?
It's very. You can probably even move around, and people can't see you. It's kind of crazy. And so,
telling stories, telling secrets.
Yes. So I didn't.
David Copperfield's gonna make you disappear.
Yeah, and so a lot of times when the magician makes airplanes appear or helicopters appear, the helicopters pretty much there the whole time on stage and is covered with this material. And so they pretty much drop a curtain, and then all of us little lackeys pretty much in this Killer Z suit pull off all the Killer Z off the airplane or helicopter and run off stage, and then he waves his hand and he's like, look, the airplane's there. So so it totally killed magic for me. So every time I see any kind of magic special, I'm like, that's horse shit. So that was one story, but it's.
Hey, Amy, cancel our magic show plans. Sorry, I had to take care of.
That's all good.
Did you ever run into each other since you couldn't see each other?
Oh God, I mean, there's like people that fell off stage, and you know,
Wow.
and it was crazy because and I kind of get it. Whenever you mess up a trick, the magician gets totally pissed off because he looks like a total asshole, and I get it, right?
Right.
And so there's been a few times where like he'll, like the Killer Z will fly off like a wing of the airplane, and there's like a floating wing on stage, and you're like, what the hell is going on right there? So the audience just sees a floating wing, and so so that magician was kind of a diva, and so we'd mess up all the time, but we try not to, because whatever we messed up, the magician would make us stay late and keep on doing the act over and over and over and over for hours and hours, just because he was an asshole like that. But hey, we made him look like an asshole. But basically, he would make us do it over and over again. If we messed up, he'd be like, do it again, do it again, and do it again. If we didn't mess up, he would keep us making us do it again, just because he was angry, And so, but yeah, there's been many times where I lie down underneath a fake airplane, thinking, what am I doing with my life?
I went to college for this.
Yes, and so fortunately, 2009, I had an opportunity to work for a firearms company. So basically, I'm going to say it's the best AK comm block manufacturing company in the United States, and it's Rifle Dynamics. So I kind of jumped on that opportunity.
Nice.
And even at this point, I'd never even owned an AK. I maybe shot an AK maybe one or two times. I've had ARs and handguns, but at this point, I never even built an AR. And so I kind of started from the very bottom. I came in and basically they had me do piecework. And so I would demill parts kits. Pretty much what that means is, a lot of AKs, you can't just, without a lot of paperwork, you can't just, bring in an AK from Egypt and just say, all right, this is a US gun now, right? There's a lot of, a lot of things you have to deal with, ITAR and all that. So, but you can get the parts if it's not a gun. So a lot of these guns would come in and the receivers would be torch cut, and so we would take all the good parts, because at the time, the U.S. manufacturing of AK parts was just horrible. The barrels were soft, and nobody was making barrels, and it was expensive to make what they call trunnions, and all the little AK parts were just so expensive to manufacture in the United States that people would basically buy these parts kits. And so, so at the time, the guy that was basically the position I took, the guy did maybe demilled one parts kit a day. So I came in, and it was funny. I came in for interview and all that, and he was like, "All right, get to work." I was dressed all nice, and so I'm like grinding steel and dressed all nice, and wasn't expecting that. So I demilled my first kit, which requires grinding off old rivets, removing all the old cut sheet metal, removing barrels and pounding out old rivets and stuff like that. And really, really dirty work. It's, a lot of the parts are covered in cosmoline. And so when I came in, I was like, I think I could do this. And so, I came in, I did one. And then like the next day I was like, all right, let me do a couple. So I did 3. And then the next day I did 5. At one point I was probably doing 15 a day. And the guy who was doing it before me was doing 1 a day. And so within, I would say 3 hours, I was, doing maybe about 15. And so I was making more than anyone at the shop, including the owner, because he was paying me $10 per kit. And so I was making $50 to $50 an hour or whatever. And then at the end of, I think, a month and a half, I pretty much did every single kit in the shop. I think it was a couple hundred. And so they're like, oh, this guy kind of understands how to do production work. So they offered me a job. And so, so I basically started from the very bottom, just sandblasting parts. I never even built an AK at this point. And, sandblasting these parts, I kind of became intimate of what parts are what, and same thing with demilling the parts kits. I didn't know what a lot of the parts did. I was like, what is this weird looking, cast part, And so, I was sandblasting for a few months, and they're like, hey, Billy, you want to try building them? So they would help me, allow me to final assemble them, just, all the parts were riveted in. So I'd put the trigger groups in and put the furniture back on and get them test fire ready for final zero. And then they're like, oh, okay. They realized that they can just tell me to do something one time and I would just do it, And so they're like, hey, you want to try building them? I was like, sure. So they showed me how to build it, and they showed me they can show me how to do it one time, and I'll just kind of go off on my own and do it. And then so they're like, hey, you want to start painting them? So I was like, sure. I did a little graffiti when I was growing up. I'm sure I can paint some guns. So same thing. You can paint on the wall. You can paint on some guns. You can dodge a wrench. You can dodge a dodgeball. So and so I started spraying. Doing spraying with Norell's Moly resin, Parker Rising guns, doing Cerakote, Duracoat, KG gun coat, and so I started painting all the guns that were coming out of the shop. And then they're like, hey, you want to start learning how to machine stuff? And so at this point, I didn't, the most machine experience I had was probably just running a drill press, and hand tools, right, from working on cars. And so they're like, sure. So they had me, first work on a lathe, and I started making like little pins. And so no one at the shop was actually traditionally trained. So a lot of them were self-trained. And so I was making little pins for hinges for folding AK stock. So I made like a dozen of those, and like, hey, okay, so try making this, and then they're like, okay, so let's move on to the milling machine. And so I started working mill, and I figured, hey, it's just a glorified drill press, right? And so so I just started picking up machining pretty quickly, and then they're like, hey, you want to learn how to weld? And so they just bought a TIG welder, and so I started TIG welding, and I picked up fairly quickly, and then I just started fabricating my own stuff and doing custom guns at that point. And so they realized I was a fast learner. And then, so within 2 years, I was a production manager of the shop. And then,
nice.
Yeah. And then in 4 years, they didn't want me to leave. So they kind of made me a partner at the company. And so,
very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was kind of a speedy, rise up in the community or in the company, but it was pretty cool.
Do you think the hands-on experience from the car thing is kind of what, doing the kind of car work you were doing is pretty Monster Garage stuff, right? You were figuring out how to make stuff work.
Right.
Right. Elbow grease and ingenuity, and boom, you're in business. Do you think that same kind of stuff, or being comfortable with that, is what helped you? One of the things that helped you with not being afraid to dive into the AK thing?
I think for sure, especially just the getting over the mindset that I can't do it, that is like too overwhelming,
right.
The fact that I'm like, I did something simple, like, changing an alternator in a car, which, before college, I'd be like, that's something I got to pay someone to do, that's kind of way over my head. And so something, a lot of times people think, oh, that's really simple. You just, usually it's right in the front. You just unbolt a belt or whatever and screw and put a new one in there, right? And so a lot of it was it was helping me as far as getting over my idea that I can't do something if I learn about it. And so definitely working on cars helped me with that. Working on cars definitely didn't teach me, as far as any of the skills as far as building guns, but it just helped me realize I could be more confident in myself, that I could rely on my hands to do the work, that I'm not afraid to get dirty, and stuff like that. So for sure, I think it definitely influenced me mostly mentally, as far as believing that I could do something, for sure.
Yeah, and realizing that sometimes you got to get creative when you're trying to fix something, or when something doesn't want to line up, or this doesn't exactly fit, so I got to find a way to make it work. And
right.
That can be a confidence builder for sure, right? You get a few of those under your belt.
And one good example was that, those Saiga shotguns, which are the AK shotguns, and no one wanted to work on those because they're kind of a pain in the ass to get the work right. So, at the shop, they were just kind of really piling up for people sending in the guns to just kind of make them really nice. And so I was like, you know what, let me just try tackling it. So I was like, you know what, I will experiment, do some research. And then so I ended up just like doing all those. And that kind of became like my signature thing, just because I started working on so many of those guns. Everyone knew I built every single one that came out of that shop, and they ended up working right, that they kind of was kind of impressed with what I was doing with the shotgun. So I kind of made a name for myself doing that with the shotgun, just because I wasn't afraid to fail. I was like, okay, it's if I screw up, whatever. They were just sitting there in the first place, And so, right. And so, the shop really taught me that, and working on cars taught me that as well. And so, but it was here where I kind of got the introduction to custom knives. So Jeremy Horton was a customer of ours, and a lot of you guys, hopefully a lot of our listeners know Jeremy Horton, right? He's
yep.
I love the guy to death.
Oh yeah.
And so he was a customer of ours, and and I know that he was on the tactical response forums. I think it was called Get Off the X, and when forums are still big, right? And so I went on this on his little corner of the forum and saw his knives. And I was just kind of like fascinated. I was like, wow, people are making custom knives. You know, I knew that people would probably make custom knives, but it was just kind of weird to think of, like, I guess, like average Joes making custom knives. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. That's kind of like a eye-opening experience, you know? So I was just fascinated, you know, and I never got a knife from Jeremy direct, which is kind of funny, you know, even to this day, I never got a knife from Jeremy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but you know, there was a mutual friend of ours. He was a contractor, and he's been to, I think, Afghanistan and Iraq. And then I pretty much bought out his entire Horton collection. And so it included one of the first 20 folders I did of his Shouties folders. So it was one of his first 20 folders he told me that he did. And so that knife actually went to Afghanistan as well. But I picked up a lot of his fixed blades as well, his plan A, B, and C, and a necker. And so that was my first introduction into custom knives. I wasn't part of the USN at that point, and I didn't join in the USN until 2012, I believe. And so, so I just kind of basically collected Hortons at that point. It was kind of weird, you know. And so, and I wasn't a big part of the community. And so, and it wasn't until, you know, when I saw basically you, Sean, working with Jeremy on the first Krampus in 2013, when I was like, hey, who is this black metal wizard? So, and so I was like, oh, wow. And so, you know, it's funny because Jeremy posted a photo of that today on your forum. But the very first Cramp. And I was like, oh, wow, there's like other people making custom knives outside of Jeremy Horton, right? And so that's when I met you, Sean, at the USN. And at this point, I was still, I think it was the year after I met you or something like that. But I started collecting knives, and I went to, you know, a couple of my first knife shows, and then I went to USN, and then I met you, Sean, and I played with one of your ruiners, and it was one of your early ones that Stuart Ashner owns now, but it was that CPM 154 ruiner with tie bolsters, and I think it had green linen micarta. And so, and that was the first knife I ever played with that was on IKBS. And so, when I thumbed the knife open, it just kind of blew my mind. I was like, holy shit. And, you know, I've said it to you before, Sean, there was something amazing about an action of a folding knife when it's tuned properly. And it's really hard to describe, you know, it's like, how can you describe that? You know, I always said it kind of feels weird. It kind of feels mechanical, kind of feels alive, organic, you know. And it's really hard to describe to somebody, you know, and the way it just flips out and locks into place, you know, and kind of like a little explosion in your hand. And and so after playing with that ruiner, it made me want to become a knife maker. And so I wanted to make something that felt and worked as amazing as that knife. And so and that following winter, I you know, invited Sean and Dave Mosier out to a military law enforcement shoot that we were doing for SHOT Show. I was like, hey, come shoot some machine guns. And then, you know, I asked Sean if I can come to the Sean Kendrick School of Kids Who Can't Knife Good. And so and so this was 2014, I believe, and in January.
Yeah.
And just got a ton of snow, and, you know, went down to Aberdeen, Ohio, man. And I just got to say, I mean, you showed immense hospitality to a complete stranger, man. And I met and fell in love with your family, and in 4 days we made 2 fixed blades that I designed, and it was it's pretty amazing. You know, the feeling when you finish your first knife is just so amazing, you know. And I still get that feeling after I finish every knife.
Awesome.
So that kind of just started my journey, you know, and I kind of felt like the universe wanted me to make knives now, because I kept meeting people in the knife industry that came and took classes at Rifle Dynamics. And that never happens. You know, I've only met a handful of people that are, you know, that actually I met by chance in the gun community that I didn't know before. Right. And So we taught an AK build class, the very first one in North Carolina, Jacksonville, I believe. And we taught it with high speed gear and G code. High speed gear makes tactical holster stuff, and mag pouches and stuff like that. And G code makes holsters. And that's where I met Craig McNugent of Empire Outfitters. He took the class.
Yeah.
And again, it was just so weird where he's like, oh, well, yeah, he's like, you want to make knives? He's like, you know what? If you make knives, I'll take 10 of your fixed blade right now. And I was like, whoa, I was like, and I was just
Wow.
and he was just taking a big chance with me, obviously, and he believed in the work I did on guns. So he was like, if he makes good guns, he probably makes good fixed blades. So, so he took 10 fixed blades and I made him 10. And to this day, if I ever do knives for dealers, I always give him first dibs because I was like, you know what, you helped a kid chase his dreams, And so, and then the year after that, I met Bill Coy, and he came and took a class with me at Rifle Dynamics, another AK build class, and he just kind of stoked the fire. He's like, "Hey, man, just do it, man." He's like, "You can do it," and he said he'll help me out, and he has. Whenever I'm like, "Hey, how do you do this?" and he sent me a message like, "Hey, this is how you do it," or "This is how I do it," and so I met Bill Coy that same year, and that exact same year again, I met John Walker of Alpha Knife Supply. He took the same build class. And so, and all of this is when I was really wanting to make knives. And so all these guys, helped me out immensely when I was getting started. And so, I was still buying and collecting knives, still thinking about making knives. And that's when I met a lot of you guys, and through Horton and this spider web of influence, I met many of the makers and collectors that are, but soon to be some of my best friends to this day. I met, you guys and, Jerry McGinnis, who I love like a brother, all the West Tennessee guys, JB Stout, Bradley James, Chad Nichols, Jeremy Marsh, Caesar and Franny, Nick Rolfe. And the list goes on, and so it was because of the Facebook groups that I met all those guys that Horton started. So, I just started accumulating equipment, and trading for materials and trading guns for materials, trading guns for equipment, it's kind of, and I just wanted to start it without being in debt, and so.
Right.
So 2014 was a crazy year for me just because, I started, making knives at 2014 and, I ended up picking up fairly quickly just because the years of making custom firearms, right? But 2014 was also the year my first son was born, and it was also a month after my first son was born. That's when my dad passed away as well, and so
oh man,
yeah, and so it was crazy. I told a story about that. I write for a couple of different venues, but I wrote an article for ITS Tactical where. I basically learning how to pick locks pretty much saved my dad's life, and it was I was teaching a class for Rifle Dynamics, and my sister called me and was like, "Hey, Dad's not picking up his phone. It's kind of got me worried." And I tried calling the maintenance guy, and he's on vacation, so no one has a key to his apartment. And so, my dad was in his 70s at this point, but he was super healthy. He would drink, but he wouldn't drink as heavy. But he also ate very healthy. He ate a lot of fish, and he would golf 3 times a week. He wasn't overweight. He was very strong. He'd buy a 5-gallon water jug and still change them himself. And he lived in the second story of an apartment. He didn't need a wheelchair or a cane or anything like that. So, I was like, all right, something probably happened. So, it was right before class started. I told, Jim at Rifle Dynamics, hey, I can't teach this class. I think something happened to my dad. And so I basically started driving to his apartment, and, I should have had a key to his apartment, but, I wasn't forward thinking like that. But while I was driving there, I contacted my wife's cousin, who was an EMT. And I was like, hey, I think something happened with my dad. Can you meet me at his apartment? So he's like, yeah, I'm working right now. No problem. So he met me up there with his truck. And then I went to his apartment, knocked on the door. no one opened the door. So I was like, all right, guys, I'm going to pick the lock. So I had a set of lock picks. I picked the lock in like 10 seconds. Wow. And then I opened the door. It was just crazy how it happened. And so I picked the lock in 10 seconds and I opened the door and my dad was like passed out behind the door. And they really wasn't sure what happened with him. And so they think he might've had a minor stroke, but basically his body started going into shock and he started going into rhabdomyolysis, which basically was shutting down his organs. Yeah. And so we just rushed to the hospital and so he had, I thought he was going to die that day because he had like a fever of 107 and then like he just started recovering after that, like, after a day or two. And so I was like, okay, so, I didn't know if he was going to make it or not, but, again, his organs were shot at that point. He needed to do dialysis because his kidneys weren't working. And, but, I think, he was conscious, and then he wouldn't be, and it would just kind of like in and out of it. And so he fought on for about 6 months or so. And I think a lot of it was because he wanted to see his first grandson, And so after he saw, a month later after my son was born, my dad kind of passed away. So, wow. And so that was 2014. And so,
but he did get to meet your son.
I think he did, he was kind of in and out of it, and it was just a crazy time, and so
no doubt
me and my sister and my wife would visit my dad, while he's in the hospital and we would just kind of take shifts and, I would go to work at Rifle Dynamics, and as soon as it's over, I'd go to the hospital and stay there for several hours and go home. And a lot of it was because I didn't want to feel guilty that I didn't give it my all if he were to die, that when my mom passed away, I felt a lot of guilt as far as, not seeing her more. And so I pretty much, me and my sister and my wife for 6 months, someone was there every day pretty much. And so we just basically grounded out and, my dad passed and, I didn't feel like I wasn't there for him, and so,
right.
But, obviously when there's death in the family, it puts things in perspective, and so I felt like, when my dad passed, I really felt like I didn't know him as, and so like, I wasn't as sad as I should have been, and so, and being a new father, I was like, oh man, I wanted a better life for my kid. I wanted to be there for my kid. And so, and I really felt like I wasn't happy anymore at Rifle Dynamics. I felt like I was getting burnt out, tired of doing the same thing over and over again, tired of babysitting, asking the employees, why are you late? And go home for being late, just stupid, petty stuff like that. And the last straw was when I got into an argument with one of the investors. And so, and I was told by his secretary that I should apologize to him because he was my boss. And I was like, oh, I thought we were partners. Okay, I see how it is. And so a few days later, I told Rifle Dynamics that I was quitting. And so, and I didn't have any backup plan. And I was like, I'm not sure when I'm leaving. It's just that I just can't do this right now. I'm just not happy. And so I left in August of 2014, and I was recruited by Radiant Weapons, and I was one of the directors. So my wife and I visited Oregon, and we just kind of fell in love with it. And again, we were just done with Vegas, and it wasn't that I didn't appreciate everything I learned while I was at Rifle Dynamics, So if someone would ever badmouth Rifle Dynamics, I would always defend Rifle Dynamics. But I felt like I needed to like move on to be happy, And
yep.
And I've gained quite the following by being part of the company, and essentially I became the younger face of the company. But hell, I've even been on TV a few times because of them. But after facing the loss of my dad, it just kind of really struck home. I kept thinking, if I were to die tomorrow, would I live my life the same? Would I still work for Rifle Dynamics? And the answer was no, Yeah. And so it was a very eye-opening experience. Well,
like you said, there's a lot of perspective, introspective even, right, that comes with loss, especially in your family. I don't know, right? It sometimes is just time for a new chapter, right? It sounds like that's what you kind of realized. And
yeah, if my dad, in all honesty, thinking, I was like, if my dad hadn't have died and I didn't feel like the way I did, I really probably wouldn't have the guts to just move an entire family with a newborn to a completely different place with no family over there for help, So,
right.
A lot of it was trauma, but I think it was like the best decision, moving to Oregon was probably the best decision we've ever done. And so, yeah, we found a rental house on Craigslist and moved to Tualatin, Oregon. And Tualatin is like a suburb of Portland, and that's where Kershaw is, CRKT, Gerber. They're all in Tualatin, and so so yeah, and then started working for Radiant Weapons, and again, it was a very eye-opening experience working for Radiant Weapons. Building AKs is awesome because you can kind of like, it's a lot more handwork. I always say it's a lot more like, knife making than building ARs are, So,
yeah.
So, Radiant was just super efficient on how to manufacture, Josh Underwood, the owner of Radiant, is probably the most brilliant machinist I've ever seen. I think he's like a savant, really. And the way that he can reduce op times on parts and the sheer amount of product that he was putting out at such a high quality. I mean, if there was like a weird scratch that, AR-15 charging handle, that's what Radiant was kind of known for, right? The rapid charging handle.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If there was like a scratch, and in the raw aluminum, he would have you hand sand it out. I was like, if you just charge this one time, it's going to get a scratch in the gun. He's like, I don't care. If not, then I'm going to scrap the whole thing. Because that's kind of how much of a stickler he was. So there was a lot of sanding, and I mean, I'm not allowed to disclose like operation times and stuff like that, but it was just really fast and super efficient of what we had. And so in 2016, Sean, you invited me back out to make my first folder, which I kindly took you up on. So, and made my first folder with you, which Jeremy Horton named the Type 56, based off the best produced AK of all time. It's not a Russian, but it's the first Chinese AK. And so people always think that the Russian AKs are the best, but the Chinese AKs are the best for sure. So if you're ever to find a Polytech legend out there, snag it up, because that's like the Cadillac of all AKs. So, yeah, that's why my first knife folder is called the Type 56, because Jeremy's like, hey, we should name it the Type 56. I was like, good idea, done. And so,
nice.
So yeah, and after 2 years of making fixed blades, I started on the journey to make folders. My ultimate goal when I first started making knives, when I first picked up that Ruiner. So I started tooling up for that. Bought my first mill and lathe for my house, and then in 2017 I bought my first house in West Linn, Oregon, and I had a detached shop. So that's where I'm at now. And so
awesome.
Late that year in 2017, Radiant told me that they had a great opportunity to move to Redmond, Oregon, which is Central Oregon. And I was really thinking, you know what? I can't really move my family 3 times in 3 years. That's just too crazy, And so I decided to leave Radiant at that point. So we left on good terms, and they're like, if you want to come back, come back. And so that's when I started Ironborn Armory in January of 2018. And then started taking knife making a little bit more seriously at that point. So it's funny because like 2018 was just last year, and I just felt like I've done so much as far as knife making wise. There was a lot of firsts that happened. I really grounded out in 2018 to improve as much as possible. And I came out with the first year I came out with 4 new folder designs. I did my first flipper with Jerry McGinnis. I went down to the McGinnis compound. And I used to only do chisel grinds, but I started doing V grinds in 2018. I did my first Damascus knife. Did my first pivot collars I made. First time using Mokutai and Damascus, and making floating backspacers, using Zerk, and ultimately just kind of like discovering my style, and fine tuning my style as far as finding the folders. Making the folders feel like I wanted to feel and look the way I wanted to look. So So, and even now I feel like, all the knives I make now are different than the knives I made last year. It feels like last year was like several years ago, just 'cause I'm like constantly looking to improve the way I can make a knife function and feel and look and yeah. And so, I'm still learning stuff and discovering stuff by accident, and it becomes a amazing surprise and becomes a standard for like all my knives nowadays. So, but yeah, that's my life in a whirlwind. Any questions?
You covered a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
I talked a lot.
I totally get what you're saying about last year being crazy, because last year it seems like your style evolved a lot, and what you were making, it's always been clean, but last year was really cool watching the new stuff come out.
Oh yeah, you refined a ton last year. I mean, not just evolving, but just refining.
Yeah.
I feel like before last year I was just kind of like dicking around, I wasn't taking it too seriously, but yeah, I just really wanted to like make every knife better than I did, where I wanted to feel like, the person who buys my knife next year feels like it's like a 100 times more improved than it was this year. So yeah, I just did a lot of fine tuning, a lot of scrapping, a lot of, destroying, a lot of experimenting, and asking for a lot of help as well. So it was, yeah, really, even like, again, even in this year, I feel like I've really tried to refine my style and stuff like that. And so I'm still trying to evolve it.
When it's interesting you say scrapping, because it's like, I remember when I started making folders, it was like, I don't know, I didn't know what to use. I'd buy every screw I could find, and back then there wasn't a whole lot of choices, and I still do that, and some of it you use and some of it you don't like, and
for sure, like, yeah, even like, I used to use 440 screws, and I was like, you know what, I want to go smaller, and so I have bags and bags of 440 screws that I don't use anymore, and it's kind of weird just kind of discovering what you like and things like that. So I totally get that, and yeah, it's been, the biggest thing I also learned was like, I always hate considering myself like an artist type, just because, the stigma that comes behind that. And, you always think of people in Portland that, wear bang bongo drums and, look like the Crow, right? With face paint and berets and all that. And I was like, that's not me. I'm I grew up in the streets, and so I didn't really, but I didn't like that stigma, of considering myself an artist, and so, but that's, and so, but whenever you would ruin a blade or, mess up, drop something, dent something, I had to scrap something, I used, before I used to be so devastated, like, oh man, I spent so much time on that, blah, 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 and cry about it and tried it so hard to fix it. And then, what I really learned was I was basically saying I got to stop being a little bitch. And so I would just say, hey, just get over it, make a new blade right away. And so I would, or your kids won't eat, stuff like that, and so like that's one of the biggest thing I learned was just like, hey, it's okay to just scrap it and just make something new, or make a new blade, or and you'll be a lot happier with the end result, because you can fiddle with something and try to save it and end up being scrap anyway. So it was a lot of learning that happened last year, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. Most of those you can't even post a photo of, because when you do, you'll be like, what if you do this to it or that?
No,
to it?
I'll
Like,
take it.
It's dead. It's This knife is dead.
Right.
I'm not asking about it. I'm telling you.
Right.
Yeah. Its existence is offensive to me at this point.
Yeah. So when you see it with a different blade, that's why.
I would always message you, Birch. I'm like, oh, I screwed up. And you're like, hey, I screwed up for today. I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. I don't feel so bad.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Mine was damaged steel, too. I was like, oh, shit. Okay. I don't feel so bad anymore. Okay.
That's funny.
That's a lot. That's one of the main reasons why I messaged you, Birch. So I don't feel so bad because, yeah. So, it was a big growth last year. And that's why, I appreciate everyone who bought my knives last year. And last year was the first time I did shows as well, and so it was pretty nerve wracking.
What was your first show, Billy?
It was the Northwest Invitational with Jade Marsh, and so
oh yeah, nice.
It was just you know, I always never felt like I was a legitimate knife maker, and so I was like, no way, I'm gonna get a table. No one's gonna buy anything, and it wasn't like there wasn't a demand on some of my stuff, you know, just that I just lacked the confidence because I'm like, you know, I'm like at the Northwest show, I'm like, you know, oh shit, I'm sitting next to Kirby Lambert. I was like, look at his knives.
Right.
Mine look like garbage compared to that, you know, or you know, and you know, and fortunately, I've sold out every show, you know, and so it's just it hasn't happened. But I always, and to this day, I still feel like, you know, that I don't deserve to share a table with this guy or that guy, and you know, it just and you know, a lot of, you know, you guys have been my knife making heroes growing up, and that's why I say I'm a millennial knife maker, because my hero isn't, you know, Bob Loveless, you know, you know, throw holy water at me, right? You know,
right,
I'll stay away from that.
But you know, my heroes were like, you know, Tom Mayo and you know, Lee Williams and, you know, Jerry McGinnis even, and Hugh Birch and Kendrick and Tom, and just seeing you guys, you know, being in this game for so long, you know, so. So I really felt like I didn't really deserve to be with you guys because, you know, I've just been fairly new at this game, and so it was kind of, you know, scary, you know, getting my table for the first time, and then I did the USN gathering as well, and so then I did Kentucky as well after that, and so I've just been kind of doing shows ever since after that.
Nice.
So what do you got lined up now? And appreciate the kind words.
Oh yeah, for sure, man.
What shows do you have lined up?
Well, I'm not doing the USN gathering this year, you know, and a lot of it was just, I'm just kind of really sick of Vegas.
Boo.
Yeah. And so
everybody bailed on the gathering this year.
Yeah, you know, like I said, it was still like, except
for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot
Tom's
of people
holding down the fort.
Just no one that you care about is doing it. I'm just kidding. No, that's mean. But no, but
son of a
no, but you know, I still love the gathering because that was like, you know, one of my first big shows, and you know, and just the friendships I met and developed at the gathering, you know. So I might look to do it again next year, you know. But I just kind of need a little bit of a break from Vegas, you know. And
amen.
And it's weird because, you know, I was born and raised in Vegas, but you know, when I was in Vegas, I never went to the Strip. You know, hardly ever. Only time I went to the Strip in Vegas was for SHOT Show, TKI, which is basically the same week, and the USN gathering. And so I never went to Strip for anything else after that. And so most Vegas natives stay away because that's like where you work, right? And so whenever I went to Vegas now as a knife maker, I'm like, all right, I'm in the casino, and then I got to go to the hotel, and then, you know, eat at the casino, and, you know, no sleep, and, you know, and there'd be days where I wouldn't see outside for like 3-4 days, right? And that's how it was.
Yeah.
And just because it kind of wears on you, and a lot of the, you know, the gun laws and stuff like that kind of happened at casinos, it was just kind of disgusted by, you know. Last year at the gathering, you know, security came to my room and basically said I couldn't have a gun in there, and they basically came and checked my room because I didn't have it clean for 2 days. And so if I wasn't there at the time, they would have just kind of, same thing that happened with Jeremy Marsh, would have just came in and just kind of dug through all my stuff. And so, you know, security walked me down with a bunch of guys. I just had a pistol because, you know, I don't want to walk around Vegas without a pistol because, you know, hell, I'm born there. I know how it is, right? People get robbed all the time. And so, you know, I'm leaving, walking around with, you know, money I have for the show, you know, and it's a lot of money and without any kind of protection. And so they're like, you can check it out every time when you come into the casino. And I thought that was just a load of horse shit. And so I was just kind of tired of, you know, all that, you know. And so having security able to check your room whenever they want, and I was just not into it, you know. So
right.
So, and with TKI moving to Nashville, you know, I was like, you know what, I don't want to do SHOT Show either. I'm tired of Vegas. I'm not doing SHOT Show for the first time in 10 years this year as well.
Wow. Good on you.
Yeah, so it's kind of, so I'm skipping Vegas for a whole year, you know, you know, wait till things maybe cool down or whatever. But yeah, so even if I did the gathering again, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to stay at Planet Hollywood. Maybe I'll just stay off strip, so I don't have to deal with any of that, And plus, there's, my favorite part about Vegas is all the great food they have there, and a lot of those places are off strip,
Yeah, so, I'm about that.
Me too, man. I'm a big foodie myself, and so no Vegas for me this year, And so my I still have family there, and so my wife and kids are going there during Christmas, but I'm not going. I'm staying home.
I was at SHOT Show 2 or 3 years ago, and I had an opportunity to go the year following, and I'm like, absolutely not. I mean, it was fun. SHOT Show was cool, right? I liked the experience, but it was so overwhelming that it's like, nah, this is something I could do every 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years and probably enjoy it. But if I had to do it every year for 10 years, I'd absolutely get tired of SHOT Show, no doubt.
Right.
I'd like to go and not work a booth. I've been a few times, and every time I went, we worked a booth, so you're tied down.
Right.
And so, I would really look forward to TKI at the end of SHOT Show, because I was just like, hey, I could finally unwind with my friends and buy knives and check out knives and all that. So with that being gone, it's just I had no interest in SHOT Show anymore. So hell, I mean, I can go there for my business, but I'm like, I don't really need to go. And so I'm not doing USN. I think I may see if I can still get into California Custom Knife Show, the one that Recon One's doing.
Yep.
I originally had to cancel because a friend of mine, Mike, who basically showed me that first Benchmade, is getting married, and he basically scheduled it during that same time in October.
Yeah.
But now he moved it to December, and I was like, well, no, that's just maybe I can still do it, but and that's just 2 months away. So if it's still possible, and I need to get on that. If not, then it's fine, And so I'm probably gonna do Kentucky after that. So even though he's getting married in December now, so I have to go to Vegas. Oh, yeah, I am going to Vegas, I guess. Yes, I'm going to Vegas for that wedding, and then going to Kentucky right after. And so
yeah,
so I'm probably do Kentucky after that.
Nice.
Yeah,
cool.
Those are the shows. I'm gonna go to Blade West because it's right in my backyard, and just hang out and brown bag the shit out of that place. No, I'm just kidding.
Just wanted to make Tom fume.
That's it. The bad word, brown bag.
Yeah.
So, are you doing Blade West, Tom?
I haven't decided yet. I still got to get a hotel for Vegas. I'm kind of the wedding this year. This summer kind of threw everything off, my son's wedding. So we're just, we're getting by. I'm thinking about doing Blade West. I'll be honest, I got to look at a calendar and see times.
Right.
Because I am doing New York, I'm doing Kentucky, and it seems like I started looking at it, and Blade West might be just a little close for everything.
Right. If I don't do California, maybe I'll do Jersey or New York. I mean,
yeah.
I haven't done a show with Steve yet, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so everyone says that they love doing the New York show. But
it's a fun show.
I heard it's pretty small.
Check out.
It is. That's kind of what makes it nice, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When is the gathering? How close is it, Tom? How far have you come along? Are you almost done?
So I actually started. Goal is to have my knives done next week because we're actually, me and Ben and my brother are going to go to Colorado and do a 14,000 foot summit.
Nice.
The week before. So
wow. Nice.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
I'll probably die, but if I don't, I'm going to go to the USN show.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
I am hanging with the kids and not worrying about shit right now.
Nice.
Kind of nice.
Yeah, it's not.
So there's a few get-togethers that a couple of our a couple of our makers and friends are gonna do, and so there's a really small show, and so there's a couple of those throughout the year that I'll probably be a part of, but nothing as far as a major show at all. So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Did you call it a get together just to make me feel bad again?
Yeah. GTG, come on. You coming, right?
It's not a show, it's a get together.
I'm planning to do New York, and I was gonna come to Kentucky, but Amy realized that that's the same weekend that my daughter graduates from college, so I'm out.
Oh,
of
wow.
Kentucky this year.
No,
Ah,
damn.
Well, congrats to Riley.
Yeah,
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah.
She's finishing.
Yeah.
She's finishing a semester early, which is pretty cool. So
Hell yeah.
That was fast.
that doesn't seem right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it has gone by fast. I agree completely.
Yeah, I thought about the California one too, but then it's right before Halloween, and we usually have a Halloween neighborhood thing.
My biggest thing is that, I really want to hang out with my friends when I go to the shows. And if they're not going, then it's kind of pointless for me to go.
Oh,
so
that's why you're not going to Vegas.
Pretty
I got
much,
it.
yeah.
yeah, that's one of the biggest.
Son of a.
It's just Tom that's going to be there. Nobody wants to do that.
Damn it.
Billy, you should come to the Jersey show because we're doing a Mark of the Maker cast get together there. We just got to drag Birch up there. We got to get Sean there.
But man, coast to coast flights are so brutal.
Yeah, that's true.
No, man, I consider it if we go to the Museum of Art and check out the weapons displays there.
Heck yeah.
Not
That's
the
all I
Museum
wanna
of
see.
Art. MoMA sucks. You gotta go to the
What?
MoMA is
Well, that's
Don't be a hater,
that's a
Tom.
very
dude. I
harsh.
hated that place.
Yeah.
Really?
Why did you hate it?
MoMA, because it's modern art. There's like 2 or 3 pieces there that were worth looking at. They had like a bunch of dust bunnies in the hall that was like an exhibit.
Then we got to be talking about a totally different museum.
Yeah, you're talking about
You old bastard.
what are you talking about? The one with the arms.
The Metropolitan Museum of Art.
The Metropolitan
Yeah,
Museum.
you want to
of
go to
Art.
the Met.
Yeah, that's where I wants to go.
Tom was like, more like Noma. I'm out. Suck it.
I'm not going to MoMA ever again.
There goes your MoMA sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm okay.
Thanks,
with that.
Tom.
No shit.
Sorry.
They were just about to
Not
send me a
sorry.
T-shirt,
Yeah.
Tote bag.
a tote bag. Yeah, right.
They literally, in one room, they had a plate of steel on the floor that was like 2 inches thick or something, maybe by 8 by 12. I don't know. And then they had the same piece hung above it, rotated, which that was the display. I was like, incredulous.
You just don't understand art.
Man, that sounds like
Clearly
a
not.
gig if you can get it.
Yeah.
They had a canvas painted white. Yeah. I'm not in.
The art is in your mind,
See?
Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Create
Okay,
your
you remember
own
last
art.
episode when Tom said he's not exactly the artist guy maker?
Right.
Yeah.
This is QED. This is proof by demonstration.
Now, I like art. That just isn't art.
They'll send
They had
you. MoMA's going to send us a tote bag, but it'll just be a pair of handles, just to spite Tom.
They had a video of a chicken house, the inside of a chicken house. You can go down here anywhere and see that. That ain't art. That's work.
Oh,
Did the
Sorry,
chickens
I'm
have
a-
large talons?
right.
Regular chickens.
Not large talent chicken. Sean's
I
out.
was excited to go, and I was disappointed afterwards.
Well, this portion of the episode is brought to you by Art.
Right. Real art, not that bullshit art.
If that
Yeah.
thick piece of steel was D2, Tom would love it. So-
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He would have powered up when he stepped on that bottom piece and stood underneath the top piece and would like whoop whoop whoop.
Boss mode.
Exactly.
He would have stole it.
Dude, I don't know what you would do with 2-inch thick D2, man. That'd be.
Whatever you want.
I'd try
Yes.
Mhm.
I'd surface grind the shit off of it, I guess. It'd take a bit to get down to 5/32, but what the hell?
Right.
So yeah, maybe I'll do New York if you guys are going to go out
Heck
there.
yeah.
Heck yeah. I got to figure that out myself, too. That's coming quick.
That's in November, right?
Yeah, middle of November, like the 17th or something like that. That weekend.
All right.
Billy, you mentioned D2. Circling back to steels.
The Circle of Steel.
Steel's pretty cool. It's part of what we do. What's your favorite steel?
I'm still discovering a lot. What I used a lot early on was AEBL.
Right.
I used a lot of 3V, a lot of D2. CPM 154. I first tried LMAX for the first time, and I was just really impressed by it. But yeah, I mostly use D2 and 3V for carbon steels, and then I use ABL and CPM 154 for stainless.
Great steels. Yeah, it seems like you use some Damascus too, right?
Yeah, I use a lot of Chad stuff. Chad was one of those guys that I was able to trade with early on, and I accumulated a huge chunk of stainless nickels Damascus. So, I'm kind of whittling down that pile now. So, I didn't want to make fixed blades out of Damascus. I thought, it'd be a waste. So I waited until I started making folders to use it. So,
Billy, when you were trying to decide what steels to use, did you do that based on influences from your mentors, or based on steels that you liked as a collector or user, or how did you decide what to use, or how have you decided what to use?
As far as ABL, John Walker at Alpha Knife Supply was like, I told him what kind of stainless I was looking for, like super grade stainless that, because I had to deal with a lot of humidity sometimes. And so he really suggested that. So I started using that back in 2014. And so made almost all my fixed blades out of that. And so, and with CPM 154, D2, and 3V was mostly because of all of my friends that are using it. And I was like, hey, I just got to try it out. I really digged it. And so, I know Sean use a lot of 3V these days, probably all 3V these days.
Yeah, that's all I've used this year if it wasn't Damascus.
Right. And so, and D2 as well, JB Style and Horton and, all those guys use it a lot. And so I tried it out, loved it, and so that's why I use predominantly those steels, and same thing with CPM 154, So yeah, I've tried some other ones, S35V and Z Finite as well. And a lot of those steels that I try to avoid steels that really require cryo. I just, I was like, this is a waste of time having to cryo everything. And so I feel like, having running two businesses, my time is really precious. I'm like, I don't want to run out and have to get liquid nitrogen all the time. And right. So I try to avoid some of that stuff, but I still have a lot of Z Finite that I'm kind of going through. But I'm always open to trying new stuff. I did my first San Mai knife today. So it was kind of interesting. I still want to try Damasteel, I know you use that a lot, Birch, and I really like how it looks, and so that's probably next on my list of steels I'm going to use. I really like that Damacor stuff that you've been using.
Yeah, it's pretty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like perfect. There's like, no flaws in it, it looks like.
Yeah, it's nice and centered and ready to go.
So, man, let's talk about the aesthetics of your knives. And you've got a really recognizable signature that you do. And, man, what's played into that? Have the guns played into that? Where did that come from?
A lot of it was actually influenced by anime, video games, and sci-fi, and so I really kind of went for that look because that's what I wanted to make. A lot of limitations about guns compared to knife making is that it's always going to be the same. I mean, you can pretty up a gun with a paint scheme or different furniture or small parts, but the main part of the gun is always going to be the same. And so I always use this as an example, but I'm like, with knife making or any kind of metal smithing, you can make a giant cock and balls out of steel, and you'd be like, awesome, I made this, right? Because you have 100% freedom of what you want to do, and if you want to sharpen your cock and balls, you can do it, right? And so I wanted to do stuff with that I was interested in, a lot of sci-fi stuff, and a lot of my name,
right.
A lot of the models I make are named after things that are influenced me via, sci-fi or video games or whatever, comics, So that's predominantly my inspiration and my influence on my style, I would say.
Cool.
And you picked up a CNC not too long ago.
I did.
I know how that went. Tell the audience how that went.
The bane of my existence. So, it was actually pretty good. And so, the reason why I decided to go with CNC was, I just felt like I didn't want to limit myself. A lot of people who say no CNC, I'm like, you're just limiting yourself. I mean, CNC actually opens up the doors to do so many different things, and so not only knife stuff, but I can also do gun parts as well. But
right.
But I found one locally, and I bought the machine used, and so it was an interesting process. I went and picked it up myself and moved it over, but the guy he pretty much didn't clean the machine, it seems like, ever. So it was just like, probably, it was probably full of like at least 2 50-gallon buckets of aluminum and Delrin chips. And so, I kind of felt confident because I was like, hey, he's only cut soft things. So that's kind of a good thing, right? So,
yeah.
so there wasn't any steel in there or titanium or anything like that. So, and by the appearance of it, it was still functioning really well, and he never crashed it. And so, he lived about 15 or 17 miles away from me. And so, I rented a flatbed truck and went and rented 2 forklifts and then picked it up. And so it was an interesting experience. It's a super mini mill, Haas. And, I'm still pretty intimidated by it, and I've never had any experience with, CAD or CAM or anything like that. So, for a while I was like, I don't know how to turn this thing on. I was like, if I turn it on, what does any of this mean? So I'm like, how do I move the spindle up and down? I have no idea, And so, the machines that I was used to, just watching and see how people work it were far more advanced. And so they were pretty much the machines that Radian was using, and there were Makinos and Morisekis that cost $500,000 a piece, and so it was just way out of my league, with, 250 tool change, holder and all that. Wow. And so, and where they get, the accuracy down to the tenths, all day, every day, and so, damn. So, everyone's like, oh, it has to be a lot easier. And so I was still very much intimidating. I didn't want to crash anything. And so, it was just a whole ordeal of, getting everything to work out. I just kind of, I sold a lot of my collection to basically, cause I still collect knives. I was like, if you can't, if right. You guys know, you can't really appreciate, custom things unless you actually collect things. I think, it's like, that's a good way to put it. You can't really appreciate the finer things in life unless you're a collector. I always say that, And so, so I sold a lot of my collection to, I even sold my car to purchase a CNC, and I spent all this money on tooling and all that. And so, so Jerry McGinnis was very kind enough to come down and help me get everything set up, And so Jerry, he's a whiz on CNC, and so after Blade this year, he came down and pretty much I just had the machine cleaned up, kinda, and so it's still full of the old coolant from the previous owner, which he basically the old owner basically he just shut down shop like a year ago. He just said, screw this. He was like a little job shop, and his wife made a lot of money because she worked for Intel. And so he just like, all right, I'm done. So he just shut down shop and just locked the door and just never went back in there until he decided to sell it a year later.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, I mean, and the machine, the maintenance on it was kind of a mess, like some of the seals were bad, and it was, the coolant was just disgusting and full of oil, and so, Jerry came down and he's like, all right, you're gonna have to clean all that shit. And I was like, all right, here we go. So just from like a just filthy, dirty machine, within a couple of days, we got everything set up and working and cutting parts. And so, again, it was, Jerry was, he's like a wizard, so, and the whole time I'm trying to remember everything he's doing, but he's, just typing away at everything like he's, and trying to remember, it was kind of like, trying to remember a pattern on Simon, because he's like, doo, 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 doo. I'm like, all okay, all right.
Right.
I was like, I'll just follow your sequence. I have no idea what it's doing, but I'm just going to follow it. All right, go. Don't crash.
Yeah.
And it worked. So I'm still learning a lot, drawing more and moving over a lot of my models to CAD and CAM but with like, knife show season and all that. And I just feel like I don't have a chance to actually sit down and design sometimes. So I need to get caught up and actually get cutting on parts and make the V2 models of most of my folders I have already kind of drawn up already. And so, but yeah, it's been a interesting experience because I've had a lot of issues with the machine as well. So I was told that, the machines will probably, it could break or, and when you don't buy new, you have to worry about things breaking, and it definitely happens. So while Jerry was down here, the vector drive on the Haas took a shit. So apparently it's fairly common where there's people that repair just vector drives all over the United States. So basically it's on the back of your house machine. It looks like a little, 1 foot by 6 foot by 8 foot little box that kind of controls everything on your Haas. And so, while Jerry was here, that thing basically took a dump and just kind of shut down the machine. And so I sent it out, and I was trying to get it repaired by Haas, but they don't repair it; they replace it for $5,000.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So I sent it out to get repaired, and it came back and it worked perfectly. And then just making it work and all that, and I found weird ghosts in the machine where there'd be like a metal chip on a sensor. So I was telling Birch about it where I'd go and press reset on the machine, and the reset will kind of gets the machine to the point where it's ready to start, and then things will move by itself. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like the table started going all the way to the right until it just maxed out the servos, and it was just really crazy. And
Wow.
Unfortunately, Birch linked me to a Facebook group that has to do with CNCs, and so especially Haas CNCs. And I posted a video, and the guy's like, "Oh, it's just a dirty sensor." So he's just like, it didn't cost me any money. He's like, just remove that plate and just wipe down the sensor. And so I just did that, and it works fine now. It's kind of,
Yeah.
And so it's been a lot of heartache because it's when people said that CNC is cheating, that's just a crock of shit, and they just don't know, So it's it's a lot of scrapping of parts when you don't know what you're doing. It's a lot of there's been I've wasted probably weeks and weeks of time just trying to get everything working right. And so and basically learning how to run a CNC machine is like learning a brand new language. It's not something I'm familiar with, and it will take me take me hours to do something that a professional would probably take minutes to do or seconds to do.
Right.
So it's not like you just press the start button. And my other gripe is this is what grinds my gears. Okay, I hate when people say no CNC and then they use water jet. I'm like, come on, don't you know that water jet is CNC?
No, right? It's a manual water jet, dude. they're using a manual water jet.
Right. So
it's got like Etch-a-Sketch knobs. You just kind of turn it around. And
it's a pantograph water jet. They have them.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
For real.
They hook the pump up to the exercise bike and you just pedal real fast.
Man, I actually had somebody telling me about one that a dude would use manually.
Really?
Oh.
I shit you not. Yeah, he made it himself.
Oh,
Check
wow.
that out.
And just moved the head around freehand.
Wow.
Oh, shit.
wow.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, what's he making?
Yeah.
Nothing.
How many fingers do they have left?
I'm not sure. I got no reason to disbelieve who told me, though. They're pretty reliable.
Yeah.
And also, it's humanity, so I'm not going to rule it.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't.
But,
That would be scary.
So right now, my CNC just kind of works as like a glorified water jet, And so the biggest problem with water jet is that, that the blowout section of the knife is usually thinner or wider. So basically, all your cuts are at an angle. So
there's always a curve on
right.
it. Unless
Right. So CNC just eliminates that for me. So, so I just have it cut out, the outside is the handles for me right now and outside of the blades. So, I'm cheating, guys. Sorry. So, yeah. So that's.
I mean, it's just different. You know, we've talked about that here many times about the CNC stuff. Everyone has their own opinion, and you know, just we advise everyone to do their homework before they shout it out too loud.
Sure. You know, but you know, again, I have nothing to hide as far as knife making and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I just kind of use it. Yeah, I am. Sorry.
I thought you said we weren't supposed to talk about that other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah,
sorry.
I have no qualms with using CNC, and I think people who don't do it, you're really limiting yourself, because you can pretty much do whatever you want. As far as, I mean, you see some of the stuff that Richard Rogers does, and it's just absolutely mind blowing, and there's no way you can probably. Well, I guess you could probably do it with manually, but you would have.
There's always a way to do it,
right? You'd have to charge $1 million for a knife, right? No one's going to buy it.
That's the thing. The market's not going to bear what it would cost for me to do some of the stuff manually that I do on the CNC. I cannot sell the pieces for what it would take for me to do it manually.
For sure. And so, and even getting you to the point where, like, even the little cool little layouts you do or inlays you do, Birch, it's I mean, how many pieces that you ruined, to get to that point too, that people don't understand.
Too many.
Let's not talk about that in case Abby listens.
I mean, how much Mogatide did you waste, huh? So,
how about let's move on to do stuff. How about fun things?
Right.
Yeah.
I just hope Billy's wife doesn't listen and start
she
asking him
knows.
about
She
comparing what it would cost to get a couple batches of water jet done versus buying a fancy CNC water jet machine.
Mm-hmm.
She knows. So, she's right there suffering with me. So, I'm trying to get my wife to actually do some of the drawing for me, because she's really good at that with Photoshop and Illustrator. And she was looking to do something. Right now, my wife doesn't work, so she's looking to, see what she's going to do as far as a career wise when the kids get older. And so, I was like, hey, maybe you can, drop some of my knives for me, and so
right.
So that's kind of a plan as well. So
I'm gonna recommend that in the future you don't say she doesn't work if she's a stay-at-home mom, because that's like twice as much work. And
for sure, yeah, unsung hero.
I've been down that road.
Yes,
I guess taking care of your kids all day isn't work, huh, Billy? Billy?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
That's what I heard.
I didn't say that, but
Billy was just fine till you guys came along.
We can edit this part out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll add this to the front.
Right.
Thanks. So I guess I'm gonna not see you any more knife shows, guys. I'm gonna be dead. Appreciate that, Birch.
It'd be in a hole in the yard.
All right, let's do some fun questions.
Okay, let's do it. Stop getting me in trouble.
We talked about the movie knives a little bit earlier. What's some of yours?
It's so easy to do the same knives you guys do, because everyone likes the same knives, right? Everyone likes Rambo or whatever, Predator or Conan, and those are all on my Grail list as well. So I try to think of movies that you guys haven't mentioned yet, so just switch stuff up. But I'm going to include all the knives you guys mentioned in my list. That's I'm just cheating that way. But I would throw in there maybe the sword of Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
It's funny because a lot of the stuff that's on my list is like swords, but I'm like, that is I love swords. I've never made a sword, and it's like everyone is like, to me, it's like the epitome of knife making or blacksmithing is basically making a sword, right? Because sometimes I get stressed out for grinding a 4-inch blade when I'm like, these guys have to grind a 1,000,000-inch blade, right? And so, but I'm like, swords are so awesome, and I always love swords, but they are the most impractical thing. You're not gonna carry around a sword, right? And so I guess you could, unless but most likely you won't. But so a lot of my list, there's swords on there. So the sword of Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, and I remember watching that fight scene, where that sword fight scene, which they say is probably one of the longest sword fight scenes in all cinema, right?
Yep. Classic.
Yep. So I'm gonna throw that out there. It was a gorgeous sword. And so, do I name a couple, or do I just name one, or what do you want me to do?
Well, if you got another one,
Sure, I got a couple. I took notes. So, I want to throw in there a movie of my childhood. It was like one of my favorite movies growing up, and it was the movie Hook. So I wanted to throw the Peter Pan sword on there from Hook, and it was not a gorgeous looking sword, but it was like a gold bladed sword with like a coconut guard on there and the handle. But when I was young, I always dreamed of having that sword because I was like, that's just so sick. It had a gold blade on there. So I'm throwing out that.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it's.
I remember the movie.
Special.
I don't remember the.
Yeah, it's basically like it had a gold blade on there and had a coconut guard. It looked like half a coconut shell. And I think the handle was maybe leather wrapped or something like that. Yeah, so I'm going to throw that out there. Honorable mentions are probably the glaive from Kroll because I'm just a total nerd like that. And that's like 5 knives in Ninja Star format. So the glaive. Who didn't want the glaive when they were growing up? You have a Ninja Star that you can command with your hands. So those I threw 3 out there. So
very nice.
Sort of Inigo Montoya, Peter Pan sword, and the glaive from Kroll.
The glaive. Very cool, man.
Along with all the other knives you guys mentioned. So I automatically add that to my collection.
Right.
So being from the gun industry, I'm going to ask favorite gun that isn't an AK.
Ooh, favorite gun. It's making military style weapons for some time. When I was working at Radiant, I pretty much wanted to build all their AR-15s, and which I did as well. So, I kind of got sick of military style guns.
Sure.
It was so I was really enjoying like lever action guns and
heck yeah.
And revolvers at that point, and so, wow, favorite gun of all time. That's really hard to say.
It doesn't have to be all time. Just how about a favorite?
I really, my grails are always, Colt Python. I'm really into 2011s right now,
Oh yeah.
Not because of John Wick, but just because they're cool,
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Joe Chambers, I have a gun coming from him, and I think he's the finest 1911 builder in the entire world, in fact. And so I'm a big fan of his 1911s. A lot of the classic guns like M1 Grands and all that, I have a big place in my heart,
Good stuff, man.
You said you got into levers as well, Billy?
Yeah, I just enjoy shooting them, just because it's something that's so different from a standard military gun, just like a Marlin 30-30 or, old Winchester and all that. It really does something for me. But, my biggest thing is like I love shooting guns suppressed. I was like, no matter what it is, I have to be able to put a silencer on there because, there's nothing like shooting a gun, with a silencer on there. So, yeah, there's so many crazy guns out there that are really cool and even right now I'm really into shooting sub guns as well. So at some point I'm probably going to build a MP5 as well. Full auto Glocks are like my favorite thing probably. If I have to put it down, one thing is it's a full auto Glock. I built a full auto Glock 34 and it's just like the funnest thing to shoot. And so funnest gun of all time, it would probably be that right now.
Cool.
So, and I've shot a lot of guns. I shot a lot of autos, but the full auto Glock is just so much fun.
I've never shot one of those. I'll have to do that sometime.
Come on down, Playboy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If Leopold wasn't an option, what would be your favorite optic?
This is an insider question.
It is, because Birch knows I'm a big fan of Leopold, and it's just because of if you ever saw their facility, you're like, wow, these guys are the best. They have, just inside their so they're the largest scope producer in the entire world. So you can combine everyone, from Night Force to Vortex and combine them all together, and Leopold still makes more scopes than all of them combined.
Wow.
And so they have a metal recycling area inside their factory.
Oh wow!
So where it takes metal shavings and turns them into little pucks, And so when you see how they water test every one of their scopes, they submerge them and all that. and just their facility is just so impressive, And if you guys know CNC machines, one of the higher end ones are index machines, right? And so they're made in Germany, and some of them cost like $5 million. And you can it's like, it'll be one area where it's just as far as the eye can see, just full of these index machines, just making these amazing, amazing scopes. And their warranty as well. If you have to warranty, a scope from like Schmidt and Bender, they're made in Germany, right? And so there's been some instances where there was a 5 to 25 Schmidt and Bender that had a illuminator constantly breaking, and so we returned it to get it fixed, but it kept on breaking until Schmidt and Bender Germany called and was like, "Hey, what seems to be the issue?" And if you send that scope to Leupold, they'll just send you a brand new one, probably same day. Even though it'd be beat up, used, even if they stop making that scope, they'll send you a one that's equivalent, And so just their customer service and watching their stuff, it's been super impressive. So, but if I had to pick something else,
he said, forget your question.
If I had to pick something else, it'd be nothing.
Whoa. Yeah, very much an inside
that,
question.
Huh?
Damn.
Wow. Anytime I ask Billy what scope, what recommendation, be like a $400 gun, and he'll be like, "You need this $5,000 Leupold."
Right.
You don't have a $400 gun.
I don't. I'm sorry.
That was completely hypothetical.
Yeah. I had to take it to the extreme.
I built Birch a gun that has like a $400 barrel in there, and he's like, "Let me put this $2 scope on there."
Right.
It works for me.
I greatly enjoyed sending that picture to you, though.
Yeah. So
Billy's a gun snob. I think that's pretty safe to say.
That's fair. He has right to be.
Being in this industry, you kind of see what's good. You know what I mean? Like, and not necessarily. I mean, because if you talk about Schmidt and Bender, those scopes are very expensive. And the fact that I prefer a Leupold over that, is mostly because of their customer service, as well. And so,
right.
I'm not too big a snob. I mean, I have cheap guns. I mean, God forbid I still have a Springfield XD left, and so you can crucify me for that. But so,
hey, Sean, cross Schmidt and Bender off the potential sponsor list.
They wouldn't sponsor you anyway.
Exactly.
Exactly. So no Burris, because I'm kind of a fan of Burris, but no.
As far as scopes that have reticles, I usually stick to Leupold. Okay. And for red dots, I even stay away from Trijicon. Even for red dots, I stick with Aimpoint. And so those are just my two go-to. And I don't care what people shoot. I'm just like, hey, as long as you're shooting, that's all I care about. So.
All right. So, Billy, we did this recent episode called 3 Knife Collection, and you had to narrow it down to 3 knives that you'd keep if you could only keep 3 from your current stuff that you have, and then 3 knives that you would choose if you could pick anything on planet Earth. No, it could be in a museum. It doesn't matter. It could be historical, whatever. 3 kind of wish list knives. So what's your 3 keepers and why?
3 keepers is I just got that first Horton back, that first shoddy back from the person I sold it to.
Oh, nice.
And the reason I sold it was, I was helping pay for funeral costs for my dad. And so I had the opportunity to buy it back last year. And so I did. And so I'll probably hang on to that one just because, it was the knife that got me into customs, and then Horton shoddy with green, I think it's a green canvas scale and D2 blade, frame lock folder. And had standoffs as backspacers. I believe that is it. So it was a linerless green canvas handle on there.
Right.
And so the second knives would probably be the 2 knives I did with Sean. And I count them as one because they're kind of like the same model. One was just a Tonto, and the other one was a clip point. So those are the 2 knives I've made. As far as first 2 knives I've ever made.
Nice. And you still have them. That's pretty cool.
I still have them. Yep. So, and then my last knife, I don't know, obviously I would want to, keep them for sentimental value, but, all these knives I see, passing off to my kids, so it's not like I'm going to keep them forever. And,
right.
Just being a collector of things, it's not like we can take them with us when we die. So it's just like, we're just a temporary steward of these knives. And so, I think the third knife would probably be, the first knife I did, for my son. And I did that with Bill Coy at his shop when I was down there teaching a class in Tulsa. And we made one of his fixed blades, and I put engraved or etched my son's name on there. My first
very
son when he was
cool.
born. So
That's awesome.
Those 3 knives are probably the 3 knives I probably won't sell. So,
awesome choices.
Yeah.
but pass them down. Yeah. So, but it's weird. Like, when my dad passing, again, that really puts perspective on life and collecting stuff. And I think what's really important is building relationships and so if these items, can share in some stories with that relationship, is worth keeping. But, a lot of times we get so obsessed with collecting, and we want so many different things. But, I really, nowadays I only want to collect things from my other maker friends, so,
Yep.
Sean, knives from you, Sean, Tom, Birch, and it does help that you guys are on top of your game, but those are the only knives I want, and so, those are the only lottos enter or whatever. And so, I just want knives that will support my friends and have some kind of other story or meaning to me. Yep. So, I don't just blindly collect, random knives for makers that I don't know. So
it's part of that path that we talk about all the time, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, and
pretty common theme.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You finally zero in on something, and oftentimes it becomes much less about the knife and much more about the people. And that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. What about the wish list knives, Billy Cho? You get 3. Pick them.
Oh man. I'm a big fan of art knives. So, like a lot of stuff from Michael Walker, his zipper and stuff like that. It just blows my mind, just like, how unbelievably gorgeous they are. And so, that'd be on my list. I guess the other 2 people I'd probably name is pretty simple. I've actually never owned a knife from Tom Mayo.
Oh, wow.
So I'd want a knife from him. Yeah. So I'd probably want a Dr. Death from him. And then, it's weird. It never happened where it's like I was able to purchase a Mayo, or it just ends up not happening, or I never won a knife from him. So I never owned a Tom Mayo. So, so I'm not. Yeah. So I'd want a Mayo, and I've actually never owned a CQC6 as well. So, which is kind of weird. Collecting for so long, I've actually only, after all these years of collecting, I've only had one custom Emerson, and it wasn't even one that he made. I think it was one that his son made.
Yeah.
So that was the only custom Emerson I've ever owned. So there's just so much rich history among the CQC6, and so
right.
Again,
call.
Since I'm a newer collector, newer maker, my grails aren't Randalls or a Loveless, because those guys are long dead to me. I'm just kidding. No, but growing up, these guys were my heroes, and even as a knife maker, hearing Tom Mayo's story about, it took him 20 years to become an overnight success. It's just like, so inspiring as well.
Right.
So it's, and there's some honorable mentions in there, Lee Williams as well. But I've actually never owned any of Lee's knives as well. Any of you guys' knives in a kickstop would be so kick ass, by the way. So I guess that's my short list.
Nice.
And yeah, I guess I could, I would also include the Sword of Conan in there, but Sean already took that.
You got to compete.
We're working on it, man. We are working on it.
Yep. You got to get to Schwarzenegger's office before Sean does.
Get through the chopper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. All right. Well, Billy, this has been a very interesting interview. I think you absolutely lived up to Mr. Cho's wild ride in your story, sharing it with us.
Yeah. I've had a pretty crazy life. And, like I was saying, most collectors or makers that I've known for a number of years never heard my background. And so it was kind of interesting sharing it. It was kind of stressful. I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about, going back in that well of my history and all that pain and discovery and all that. So yeah, it's been interesting.
One question that we didn't hit on that we probably should before we go, if you don't mind, is about the whole fact of being a newer maker. I think Billy's the newest maker that we've had on the show, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'd say so, but it's hard to imagine.
So I've been making 5 years, going on 6.
Right.
Yeah, I guess so.
So
I have a hard time thinking that he's new, though, just because I've known him for a while. So it's different in my head.
So Billy, talk a little bit about that. Like, what kind of challenges do you think that newer makers face today? What kind of issues are there? Or what kind of steep uphill climb do you face as a newer maker in the current environment?
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, we've all seen the knife market change, even as a collector, right? And so I feel really fortunate to have the sort of following that I had before I started making knives from building firearms. And so a lot of people basically trusted me to build a decent knife, which I really didn't. So, but as a collector, I also saw people at shows, right? The USN Gathering Blade Show that showed up with a table full of knives and still had a table full of knives at the end of the show. Right. And I was like, what do I need to do to not be like that?
And I'm still going.
No, you can do it. No, not you. But like, and so I really try to do, as far as be active on social media, and do my best to be as personal as possible, and you guys are really right. As far as if you go to the shows, you have to be active. You have to be approachable. You have to, be humble, just, don't be a dick. Right. And so, I just started reflecting on, and I just wanted not to be, a guy that ends up just, going to the flea market and selling my knives over there, and just cause, I just wanted to be really active, answer as many questions as possible, be fair, have fair pricing, and so, and especially with all the makers on Instagram and Facebook, and there's a ton of people, I don't even know who they are, so you got to really try not to copy anyone else, and that's so difficult. I mean, you could only make, a cock and ball is so different, right? and so try not to be a tracer, in the b-boy world, we'd call someone that would copy a move a biter, and we'd just call them out and just be like, hey, you're stealing my shit, but so many, makers these days are kind of afraid to say, hey, you're not doing it the right way. I don't know why. Maybe you don't want to offend anybody, but if someone's copying someone, you should be like, hey, stop that shit. Especially I think it's a responsibility for, I wouldn't say just veteran makers, but, regular makers as well, newer makers. If someone is copying someone, you should be like, hey, that looks like this. Maybe you shouldn't try to do it anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I also feel like there's a lack of trust in new makers. And what I mean by that is, there's been a lot of makers that come and go, and I guess that's just normal in history, but it just seems like there's a lot more knife makers these days. So it feels like a lot of the people that buy knives, they're buying knives in this industry to see it as an investment opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So, so if you're new, many people are reluctant to buy your knives, because they're like, oh, this guy's gonna stop making knives a year from now, or he's gonna, whatever, he's gonna disappear or find some other interest or whatever. So I think you have to be active in the community and just kind of grind, you have to pay your dues. And so you have to also, what I noticed is you have to just keep on trying to improve and get better and try to be unique. And so That's some of the things that I've kind of dealt with. I was like, hey, I don't want my knife to look like this or that, or how can I show people that I'm here to stay, that this is not just a hobby for me, So those are some of the challenges that I face.
Yeah. No, for sure. Different game, right?
Yeah, for sure. And transitioning from a collector to a maker, man, it was pretty eye opening. It's just especially because again, the market is so different. Even from 5-6 years ago to what it is now. And so you have to be willing to evolve and adjust. Again, come up with a bunch of new models because you never know what's going to stick, and so what's going to be popular.
Right.
So that's just the nature of knife collecting as well, And one example of that was a knife I made for the gathering last year, and it was like Chad Nichols 3 alloy. It was copper, zirc, bronze, and I had it like colored all crazy. It was like red and gold, and the zirc was blackish, like grayish, and people were like, "Oh, that's cool," And then so, but at the time, people weren't really into it,
right?
And then like a year later, people are like, "Where's that knife? Did you just make that? So awesome!" I was like, "I made that last year," and they're into it now, So you have to be willing. You have to be willing to be flexible and change, and just keep coming up with new stuff until a model is just a hit.
Yep.
So it's just constantly evolving and trying to improve yourself. So
I think that's a good attitude.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, I want people to, who bought my knives last year to be like, man, he makes such a better knife now. And then I want people to say the same thing next year and again and again.
Right.
And I know eventually, as far as skills wise, you'll plateau, but I want it to just be so dramatic that people just get excited to see what I'm going to make next, So that's kind of like the attitude I'm trying to approach it at.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
good for you, Billy.
Off topic, but I just had a great shirt idea. Mark of the Maker, Billy Cho quote, "Don't be a dick." Boom, done. Just a black shirt.
Right.
I also have one that you can use is S my C. That's another one you guys could use. Yes. And you can fill in those blanks to whatever you want it to be. But
right, like Hangman.
Yeah, S my C. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
awesome.
I want royalties for that shirt.
Yeah, there you go.
Can we just
Yeah.
can we have a CAD drawing of your cock and balls to put on a shirt?
Right.
No problem. No problem. You can have it.
Billy, thanks for joining us, man.
Really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure,
man.
guys. So you guys are some of my favorite people in the world. So it's always a pleasure talking to you guys. So
good times.
Thank you, Billy.
Okay, so we should probably just give a thank you to everybody. We've had very, very nice response to episode 31, the last episode with Nick Rolfe. Lots of good conversation around that. We did have a listener who wasn't happy with us and didn't like gun talk, and so he'll really hate this episode. But we appreciate the feedback, whether we agree with it or not, or whether it's positive or not. So please always don't be shy about reaching out and telling us what you thought about a show. If there's something that we said that you disagreed with, let her rip. We're all ears, and we have a perspective. We're going to give it, and we're going to give you guys the best show we can. And if you think it sucks or you disagree, let us know, and we're always open to that feedback.
Or call us rednecks, whatever.
I do all the time.
Yeah, it's okay.
We also should say thank you to our Patreon supporters. We keep getting people adding on all the time, and that's very cool. We appreciate everybody's help and support for the show. So thank you for that. And just even for your iTunes reviews and other stuff, that stuff really helps the show as well. So if you haven't, please go out and leave us a review on iTunes. Okay, well, that's it for episode 32. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Take care, you guys. Thank you.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Krein on the web at KreinKnives.net, in his Facebook group, Krein Knives, or in his Instagram account, at Krein Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at BirchTreeBlades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.